Judge, adjudicate, punish, execute, discipline. These 5 words of power are used to define the judges, the Banu Haqim. Or do they actually? I am your Lord and Saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. These vampires are descended from the antediluvian Haqim, whose goal in life and those of his descendants, the Banu Haqim, or the Assamites, is to punish the guilty and treacherous children of Cain who abuse and mistreat their powers. They would quickly become feared Diablerists, taking said power from their foes by force as medieval Cainites and Crusaders threatened their Middle Eastern homelands. So feared they were that the Tremere of the then new Camarilla placed a blood curse on them that would be broken some 400 years later when the powerful blood sorcerer and child of Haqim, Shogi, would awake from his ancient torpor and perform some hocus-pocus shit. In the modern 20th anniversary and 5th edition Knights, the Assamites, now mostly known as the Banu Haqim, depart from the safety of their hidden fortress Alamut and ally themselves to the Camarilla, partially filling in the void left by the violent Gangrel and Brujah, as well as providing additional access to blood sorcery within the Ivory Tower, much to the annoyance of their ancient foes, the Tremere. The Banu Haqim were amongst some of the most deadly kindred in the world of darkness, but they are also some of the most diverse and therefore difficult to approach during roleplay. Many people may be put off by their origins, just the perspective of wanting to portray their stereotypically mortal faiths respectively. Many of the clan are of Islamic faith, especially those who align themselves with the Ashira, the Islamic sect of vampires that ally themselves with the Camarilla. The Banu Haqim means sons of Hakim, which is why they are called this in V5. Assamite is very much a Western kindred name, and this isn't a V5 thing either. The Assamite always preferred the term Children of Hakim, and the Ashira were very much a prominent feature in older versions of Vampire 2. Their entry into the Camarilla also began in Beckett Jihad's diary, but was kinda hinted in Revised Edition. Now, whilst I'm not going to discuss who and how the Ashira operate, as I already discussed that on a previous episode, nor am I going to give a lecture on Islamic faith because, quite frankly, you don't need to be studied or learn Islam to feel an authentic member of the Clan of the Hunt. India and many of the African countries are filled with the Banu Haqim, as well as those European ones and, of course, America. They, the Banu Haqim, were just one of the last ones to diversify when it came to those who they choose to embrace. The higher the generation, the younger they are, and the more varied their ethnicity, especially if you are an Anarch, which is often the result of the clan's archaic principles simply failing to function well. Anarch Banu Haqim tend to be apolitical, having seen enough of politics amid the clan's own schism and return of the ancient members of the clan who have harshly criticised the direction of the clan. That does not make these Anarchs cowards, as they are still just as fierce, righteous kindred, still following the laws of Hakim, just with a freer and different focus. Banu Haqim Anarchs are among the strongest supporters of the Anarchs, since they truly want a change to affect kindred society. Unlike many of their modern brothers-in-arms, they have seen the alternative. But what about these older fans or the curiously new who wish to see what it was like to be a Legacy Edition Assamite within the V5 boundaries? Well, Forbidden Religions, one of the Cult of the Blood God stretch goal books, reintroduced the traditional Assamite mindset with the Shepherds of Ol-Shagi cult, so you too can follow those blood laws and the laws of Hakim as originally intended, devoting to Ol-Shagi without any concern about whether your Banu Haqim should be Islamic. Just make sure that you, the player, don't make your Banu Haqimin intrusive to the rest of the group. No one likes a moody murder hobo. To that end, clothing for most children of Hakim is simple and functional so as not to get in the way of fighting, running, or whatever becomes the order of the night. On the topic of murder hobos, let us touch upon the application of diablerie, as they are not freshly embraced Sabbat that don't know any better. The Assamites are judges of kindred and kind, as decided, or do I say, destined, by Hakim and Cain, who placed that task upon Hakim. The world may have changed, but the kindred haven't really, so these ancient practices, from the perspective of the Banu Haqim, do not need to change. They feed on those unworthy of the blood in their veins. It is a sacred punishment whose demise is strength from the judge. The ways they go about doing this are just as varied as them, but every feeding, for lack of a better phrase, is sacred, so blood is not taken lightly, especially for the Banu Haqim. Now, this is complicated somewhat by their bane of getting addicted to vampire blood, which also adds to the overall themes of discipline and restraint of their act, whilst the compulsion, in my opinion, trivializes it. As for their alternate bane found in the player's guide, not gonna cover up because that's just fucking stupid. The things that most people will tell you about the Banu Haqim is that they are assassins and fulfill their contracts for the highest bidder. Instead of money, they get blood for themselves and alumat. Yes, this is true, and their disciplines match this, but that is where a lot of diversity of the Banu Haqim comes in, what I think is overlooked and ultimately forgotten. The Banu Haqim has always had a caste system, so each Azamite could better fit into an assigned role. V5 tends to mention two of these, the warrior and the vizier caste, but there is also the sorcerer caste. Viziers, in this instance, are scholars. In V5, this has no mechanical benefit, as it would do in previous editions of Vampire. Neither does it have any additional flaws, thank goodness. The castes are more contextual flavour, depending on the character concept, which I feel is just as freeing as it is annoying, but that is the purist within me talking. Like with all vampire clans, the Banu Haqim have access to 3 disciplines: celerity, obfuscate, blood sorcery, and the accompanying rituals. Celerity allows them to pursue their targets, act on instinct when it matters, and the book when it goes tits up. There are more physically inclined characters may wish to invest points here. Obfuscate allows one to stalk the prey you hunt, shadowing your target to get the drop on them, which makes this the perfect blood-based power for assassins, but those who know the importance of taking their time as well. There are also those that do not wish to kill, but to learn, hiding in a corner, listening and observing, and sneaking out with the goods when no one is watching. Blood sorcery, however, has many uses, which is very much depending on the character you wish to make. Are you more of a scholar who wants to understand, use it to deliver devastating damage, stand into the rituals and wards of this ancient clan, or is it just a flashy tool when fiends are tight? Sure, there are only a handful of wards and select few blood sorcery powers in V5, which are steadily growing, but the concept you create will view these fiends differently. Vizier and sorcerer overlap in some senses, but one is more proactive than the other. So we have established that the Banu Haqim can fulfill more than one well-established assassin role. Anyone who upholds, interprets and acts upon laws and contracts will do, which covers both the martial and the political, depending on the caste in question, as well as the moral good and bad. The Ashira is strongest in Saudi Arabia, Iran and Afghanistan, though it has some influence in Egypt as well, so it would mean they and the Banu Haqim, who are the implied rulers of the Ashira now, are just as capable as any Ventrue to rule in these areas. Post-embrace, the rules change, no longer bound by the laws of humans, but by the decree of your god, whether it is Al-Shagi or Hakim himself, assuming you don't join a cult and worship something else. How do you cope with that, or justify your cold judgment? That is not to say that all Banu Haqim are noble, far from it. Well, contract killers are cannibalistic cults warrant the title of noble, but the judgment, pun intended, is somewhat skewed. Amongst the clan are actual criminals who could be fashioned into the Hakim way of thinking, or discharged soldiers wanting to find redemption now have an eternity to find it, if that is indeed what they want, assuming they are not a crazy gun nut rushing into the next kill or drinking something. That said, such people don't tend to last within the clan. There are also plenty of bookworms and occultists that are embraced by the Assamites. So with this wide range of functions, there are many ways you can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. Most common for the Banu Haqim is going to be the Alley Cat and Bloodleech. Alley Cat has no real preference on who or what you can feed, which is pretty important for somebody who is on the move a lot, but does require a bit of a struggle, which is to be expected from a clan known to get hands-on. Bloodleech also makes sense if you want to explore the relationship one may have with Diablerie and the effects it would have on your principles, humanity, and shifting judgments, as is what is acceptable will mirror this. Mechanically, both of these possess celerity and reflect the distant humanity found within the Banu Haqim. The more morally bound Assamite may justify the lack of interaction found through sleeping prey via the Sandman predator type, a less sinful approach. An additional dot and obfuscate can be found here too, which is perfect for sneaking and becoming the master of disguises. Meanwhile, some assassins in media use their sex appeal to throw off the weak-willed, making the Siren predator type an unexpected yet interesting fit awarding the character appropriate line specialties to their character sheet. Another tricky one is the extortionist predator type from Cults of the Blood Gods, tying in the contract-fulfilling element to feeding. On the topic of cults, Osiris is just what you need to indoctrinate the foolish mortals into your faith. That, and you get some blood sorcery from it. Something that is also keeping in mind is the many predator types that gives you contacts and resources, which are appropriate for any assassin or scholar, so you have the means to find someone or something, regardless of sect. Banu Haqim are solitary kindred, so any haven they will have will probably be far away from their coterie and life in general, for the sake of their targets, and the Assamite's own sanity. The skills should reflect this too, with anything geared towards combat and hunting from martial Banu Haqim and arcane pursuits for scholars. Investigation and awareness are must-haves for any Banu Haqim you create. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here's some of the ones I think will fit with tonight's clan. From the core book, you may want to add low clan if prestige or the lack of thereof is a consideration for your chronicle. From the Anarch book, there is Anarch Revolt, as the Assamites are one of the key players for kicking things off. Perhaps your character knows something about it, or how to orchestrate another one. From the Camarilla book, there is the Hand of Vengeance, Fatimir al-Krakli, the legendary 6th generation Assamite of the warrior caste. Many of the character-based lore sheets work well because of the contact nature of the Banu Haqim. You may wish to run into them or have them get in touch with you for reasons. On similar notes, you have Justicar Lucind and Agents of Justicar Parr from Fall of London and Chicago Folios respectively, both focusing on the more combat-heavy Assamites or ones that are willing to get their hands dirty. Similarly, Archons from Chicago Folios makes you both very important and ready for combat. And on those notes, both for combat and Chicago, both the Anubi from Let the Streets Run Red and Lupine Expert from Chicago by Night encourage the player to fight, engage, and study werewolves. So if you want the Children of Haqim to go toe-to-toe with the Children of Gaia and other Guru, you have to use your uber violence there. If kindred on kindred violence is more your thing, try Monomancy, kindred dueling from Chicago Folios. Not my joke, but my Sabat-loving girlfriend. So hot, so dangerous. But I digress. If you like the idea of delivering contraband and cargo, but I'm not so keen on fighting, perhaps the Pony Express from Chicago Folios is best for you. For even more refinement, for those Banu Haqim who are more focused on their studies than field duty, I would recommend Occult Artifacts from Chicago Folios and half of the Blood Sigil lore sheets, Veins of the Earth and Vienna Zero. The only lore sheet exclusive to the Banu Haqim as of the writing of this guide is Descendant of Al-Sharid, who also comes from Blood Sigils, putting you that bit closer to Al-Shagi. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers and mechanics that work with and against them. These are just my takes and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make the concept a little bit spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Revolt, protest, fight, oppose, resist. These 5 words of power are used to define the rabble, the Brujah, or do they actually? I am your lore and saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. You probably noticed that I am saying Brujah and not Brujah, which is purely because to call them Brujah is wrong. If you open up page 136 of the original Vampire the Masquerade core book, you will find a Tim Bradstreet classic dominating the full page. At the bottom of said piece is the text that reads Brujah, indicating that I'm very much indeed pronouncing the clan correctly, which you can hear in Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, which came before Bloodlines. You'll also notice that I spelt the word differently. The clan is spelled Brujah with a H, not Brujah without a H. Brujah is a Spanish word meaning witch or sorceress, but Brujah isn't, so pronouncing Brujah as Brujah is phonetically incorrect. But as I'm just some guy on YouTube and not a native Spanish speaker, you will find a native Spanish speaker working at World of Darkness and Paradox Interactive explaining the correct way to say Brujah in a link in the description below. If you don't like it, stay mad and cope, for I am the law. The Brujah are vampires descended from the antediluvian Elise, though some would argue a different vampire claimed that mantle. You see, most Brujah that gave a shit would say that their founding member was an individual known as Troil. Elise was said to be a cold and emotionless soul who would embrace a more fiery soul, Troil, who would eat their sire's soul and assume the rank of antediluvian and spokesperson for the clan. Alongside the Toreador antediluvian Arakel, Troil helped form the Road of Humanity and would lead that infamous charge into Carthage, whose downfall would forever serve as the salt in the pustulating wound in the Brujah clan, with a whole death cult enslaving the masses in between. However, the intended vision would inspire the vast majority of the clan's aims as the de facto rulers of what would become the Anarch movement, establishing a status quo between the human race and vampires, crushing oppression in all their forms. Wherever there is a struggle, an establishment to tear down, or a pig in uniform to beat back, you will find Brujah inspiring the people. They are the people's clan, fighting for what they believe is right. More often than not, they thrive and embrace those who thrive in counterculture or revolution, those who don't conform to society's rules but demand a society for all. Brujah are not interested in sheep. They think and act the same way, and safety in numbers can only do so much. If you do not put yourself on the line to make life better not just for you, but for those who come after, what are you doing with your own life? Go out there and fuck shit up for the people! That distinction is very important because most define the Brujah's outbursts as a product of their clan weakness, and their bane as unbridled rage, which is telling, given the player's guide has their stupid alternate bane is all about violence. The flaws of the clan derive from their own founder's flaws, which in the case of Troil, whose overly passionate nature, for lack of a better phrase, got the better of him. Alternatively, Elise was cursed with the inverse of her nature, out of spite, but debating the origins of the clan's weakness is pure semantics at this point. The weakness of the Brujah is passion, not rage, which in vampires manifests in the form of frenzy, be it rage or fear, or a great desire to chow down. In the mortal shell, passion comes in many forms, and the blend of human emotions and vampiric needs is a horrible mix, but passion dictates a purpose for whatever the associated emotion is, be it true love, the joys of a special interest or obsession, or a great sense of injustice that needs to be wrong. Passion is the catalyst to obtain these desires, to make what is right within your world. With the Brujah, these emotions and needs are amplified tenfold. Mechanically, this helps the player feel the plight of the Brujah, to hype up their emotions in the game, as not everyone who steps into the shoes feels so passionate about these things, or is a Molotov-throwing anarchist with a mohawk. Whilst it is all fine and dandy tearing down the establishment, if you don't have the means to bring it back up again with something better, then all that violence and rioting was senseless, and the Brujah have plenty of that. Out of all the clans, they have the most significant influence on immortal academia, which stems from their past as aspiring philosopher kings. These more scholarly Brujah have been dubbed Helanes, the most influential of whom are some of the elders of the clan who continue to exert efforts in drawing potential embraces from this pool. Of course, it is a losing fight. It is a dated practice, a cold era long gone, found pretty much only within the Camarilla. Out within the old, in with the new. The Brujah as a whole loathe this line of thinking, as it often goes hand in hand with the political squabbling of their enemies in the tower. The Brujah rule in the streets, manipulating from within the hordes of angry voices. They may be the clan of the people, but they are still vampires that rely on the blood-infused powers to ultimately get their way. It is also important to mention that it is not uncommon for a Brujah to embrace any random schmuck and fuck off and let them work everything out for themselves, which is a very common practice within the clan, but there is a lot in that. This may seem counterintuitive, as you would want to bolster your descendants to join the cause, but why would revolutionaries groom the ones they want to help break free? Now, you could argue a lot of reasons for this case, with many answers associating freedom fighters with terrorists and blind cultists, but without the taint of a sire or informal mentor. The child have no basis or bias in their upbringing, taking their kindred experiences at face value, experiencing the corruption of the world of darkness as it happens to them and around them. They can be preached about how something is corrupt and messed up, but if Timmy the accountant who was quite happy with the world doesn't feel it, then that heated passion is misdirected and ultimately wasted. Sure, someone of the Camarilla may swoop them up and try and groom them into a more tolerable member of kindred society, but the learned clan cannot be contained and the oppressed child will snap, hopefully with one of those corrupt fucks in the process. Said folks in the kindred world are often the Ventrue, who are probably their only real competitor when it comes to fingering the mortal pie, but the thing that makes these two clans different is their interactions. The Ventrue seek out institutions, companies, and ways to profit off mortal society beneath them. The Brujah focus on the individual. They may not focus on a powerful political candidate, which is peak Ventrue behavior, but the Brujah probably know all the people the politicians shat on to use as a means to overthrow the political campaign that could be used against the Ventrue. The stereotypical DIY approach to the heads of the movement lent itself to the choice of disciplines, or is it the other way round? Presence can aid in inspiring fear and awe in spades, perfect for drumming up emotional feelings during important speeches and rants, but also to bestow some of that anger upon the ears of all that will listen. More philosophical Brujah could get away using presence in a rant or any form of debate, perfect for creating or making new common enemies. Potence works wonders for those moments when you want to punch first and ask questions later, which is probably going to be most of the time knowing the template well. Most importantly, it is a tool. All the disciplines are, but exercising that too much will make the Brujah stand out, and if people start noticing you are a superhero in leather, they may not only fear you, but turn blindly to you for help, forgetting their individuality, having it replaced by disillusioned fanaticism. On a simpler level, potence is pretty effective to yeet a brick at a cop or a cop at a brick wall as hard as vampirically possible. Celerity also has many uses for the frontline Brujah. They can guarantee getting in the first punch and escape the riots they started. Regardless of the type of Brujah you are, it can be used to hunt or pick off vessels from the street, brutally sucking them off and or disposing of the evidence before anyone can blink, disappearing into the night once more. With this wide range of functions, mostly with the discipline usage, there are many ways you could bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. The alley cat fits into most Brujah concepts, as you can't be picky at a riot or clubbing someone's face in. That, and many of them don't care about the sort of food they eat. Food is food after all, though I imagine one would prefer to fiery blood of rebels than a fat cat with bloated pockets. Maybe every so once and often to piss off that one Ventrue, but not too often, I think. Those that are trying to find their feet, or particularly young, may not want to take advantage of strangers but find it safe to do so with trusting family members via the cleaver predator type, or the safety of a trusting immortal friend with the consensualist. For a vampiric twist on this, Bloodleech may work, as you may find taking advantage of mortals, the ones you deem to be your equals, to be a step too far. Really guilt-ridden Brujah could feed on the non-consenting animals via the farmer predator type. Osiris would only be common if you attempted to establish a modernized Carthage or some other new faith religion to forward your revolutionary motives. On a smaller scale, Hellene Brujah may focus on feeding on those from a similar cliques via the Scene Queen. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here are some of the ones I think fit well with tonight's clan. If you want to associate your character with some of the big cheeses within the Anarchs of 5th edition, try putting some dots into Theo Bell and Rudy from the core book, and Agatha Starek and Salvador Garcia from the Anarch book. Also from the Anarch book, we have the actual Anarch Revolt lore sheet, as they were the poster child for the whole thing. The more academic-leaning Brujah may want to consider the Ruins of Carthage lore sheet from Anarch 2. Going back to the core book, the Bahari now appears to be more Anarch-aligned rather than a faction in of itself. That is also a choice you may want to consider, though this isn't a lore sheet limited to the Brujah, of course. Descendant of Tyler and Descendant of Mullane are from Anarch and Chicago Folios respectively. If it wasn't apparent, these are Brujah characters, both with lots of weight and importance to the overall plot of Vampire the Masquerade, particularly Tyler for the Anarchs. Unlike Tyler, Mullane has 2 lore sheets connected to him, the other being Mullane's in Children of the Blood, if you want the connection to the Child of Troy to be more cultic in nature. To that end, any cult-related lore sheet would be great for reinventing the Carthage death cult vibe, but with a brand new 5th edition twist. Both Mullane and Tyler have a lot of sway in Chicago, and many of the lore sheets do apply to Chicago-aligned Brujah, while some are more general and combat-focused, like Lupine Expert. Some of the Chicago-based ones from my previous Bloody Guide episode apply here too, but one from Chicago by Night that is more fitting for the Brujah is Kindred Iconography, as V5 has a small focus on vampires using code to highlight locations and meanings, which would be adopted easily by the Brujah. To return to the core book once more, the Brujah are in the interesting position to benefit from both the low and high clan lore sheets, just not at the same time, of course. Finally, the circulatory system has your kindred become a little more involved with the movement of the people, albeit for less humane reasons. Unless, of course, your Brujah is aware how messed up things are and is trying to make things better. Or you could just frame it in the sense that it's not the circulatory system, it would be something far worse. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers and mechanics that work with and against them. These are just my takes, and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make the concept just a little spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Pandas, orphans, trash, scum, freestylers. These 5 nicknames are used to describe the clanless, the caitiff, or do they actually? I am your lore and saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. The Caitiff or Caitiff are often referred to as the Unbound, for they are unbound from traditional kindred traditions and biology. They are vampiric in nature, but are not bound by a trio of blood-paced powers and common banes or compulsions that forces them to act towards their more instinctive nature when the beast does not get its own way. They are unwelcome in most sects, untrusted by some, mocked by all, and bringers of the end times to a depicted antagonistic bunch. whether they feel proud or shamed of their lack of lineage, it is an experience that brings only hate and loneliness, except for the found families they choose to have, assuming they are so willing to trust others of their ilk, harboring the same prejudices that keep them locked out of kindred societies. Immediately, it makes the gene pool as limitless as one's imagination. The existence of the Caitiff is almost accidental in that few kindred go to embrace someone willingly seeking out a clanless vampire. Accidental embraces do occur. A sloppy feeding scene gone wrong is a common excuse for such a creation, one that could explain the accountability for some Caitiff. Some clans, such as the Brujah and Gangrel, are known for their carefree attitude for their embraces, ones that are devoid of meaning and passion, two things that make up the kindred existence, dating back to the times of Cain's curse. This rushed, passionless job, as it were, could also explain the existence of some Caitiff. The transfiguration was incomplete, so to speak. The Caitiff are usually of a higher generation, so you could argue that the blood of the individual was not strong enough to complete the change, causing it to spread and becoming something else entirely, like a cancer but in reverse. These are all theories and ideas, mind you, and you're not to be taken as the truth, but as someone's truth to explain away their lack of love, affection, or just attention from their sire, or a means to hide their traumatic experiences, the embrace fucking them over twice, once for killing them and once for doing it one. There is, however, no real sure way to create a Caitiff unless your sire is a Caitiff themselves, but we'll return on to that in a moment. Caitiff embraced by those who are content enough to stay to teach them the basics the child in question know something is not quite right with their supernatural outfit, despite their sire's hopes. Sometimes it is obvious, like a Nosferatu without the disfigurements, Lasombra able to see its reflection, or Hecata that does not cause agony upon engaging the kiss. Sometimes it is less so, like a Malkavian is not overwhelmed by the stimuli from all perceivable directions, a Toreador without a concept to obsess over, or a Ventrue not on a special diet. Some would naturally develop some of their sire's skill sets just through the means of education. A Banu Haqim would probably instruct the importance of obfuscate and administer their presence, so it is worth considering who the clan of the sire is and what they saw in you. What were the skill sets they saw in you? What were the tell signs that something was amiss? How do they view you now, with great disdain or trusting you only at an arm or fingertip away? Now, this sounds like regular character creation questions, treating the Caitiff as a social status, which is absolutely spot on. Being referred to as a Caitiff has a lot of political weight to it, but very little of it is good. It is possible for a regular clan member to be such a colossal fuck-up to their bloodline, they can be denounced of their clan and treated as clanless, which to most in the Camarilla is a fate worse than death. Though I will mention for the purists that this is mainly an older edition thing, but there is no reason why small V20 and revised edition details can't be introduced to the most wicked of 5th edition neonates. In more modern 5th edition settings, many actively seek others to embrace others. Thematically, this is the end times. Gehenna is coming, our Beckett would argue, cyclical. There have been instances where numbers of Caitiff and Duskborn numbers have swelled, and it's implied that this is the largest bolstering of numbers to date. It is arguably the most dangerous from the perspective of the Camarilla, paranoid of the influx of the clanless, more individualistic and chaotic than before, which isn't to say there are mindless monsters like the Sabbat. It is more that the systems of old are dying, their princes are being pulled away from their thrones, and those that are stepping in large lack the means to properly step up. All Caitiff have similar walks in life, regardless of whether embraced by a Ventrue because of financial reasons or as Tzimisce because of their vinyl collection. All Caitiff will know the uncommon hardships of discrimination of being something they cannot control and didn't ask to become. The only things kindred society hates more than you are the Duskborn, and they barely constitute as vampires. Therefore, the Caitiff seeking to embrace is likely to choose strong-willed individuals with a sense of oneself, regardless of sect affiliation. If you're not afraid to fight for the right to be remembered, not as a hero but as someone with a right to exist, then you're not worthy of that. Sure, it fits the Anarchs to a T, but not all Caitiff are Anarch. But Caitiff were around before the Anarchs and faced the injustices and genocides to their kind for many years before the Brujah, Lasombra and Tzimisce did, who are the three of the most influential high clans in Vampire the Masquerade, who could have done this at any point in history. If change and equality was something desired, they would have reset the rules completely, disregarded and discarded the ramblings of nodists and not contributed to the destruction of Caitiff. But when the privileged few are effective, then banners of change are hoisted. To get up night after night, despite the disillusioned hierarchy, afraid of change and fearful of revolution, with the same tools as them, beating at their game is brave, inspiring and heroic. To simply exist in the face of bigotry and discrimination out of spite is applaud-worthy in of itself. With all this in mind, it is easy to see why the Caitiff lean towards the Anarchs more, and on the surface it does make sense. The social flaw of the Caitiff is non-existence in the Anarchs, because why would they care? Your clan doesn't define who you are as a person, your beliefs do, which is a message that everyone should adopt, but it's not something that the Anarchs do not perfectly follow, and the Caitiff do not get a free pass. Members of different clans have safety in numbers, subconsciously following the us versus them ideology that is much deeper than anything Camarilla versus Anarch. It's a mentality dating back to the first examples of civilization, tribes against tribe, beast against beast. The different breeds of vampire are literally called clans, a large family of common interests. Those who, with different opinions and interests, clash and lead to ruin. Paint it with a goth punk coat of paint if you want, but it is very much a kill or be killed living ideology. It is called the world of darkness for a reason, you know. The Caitiff flock together through their shared unity in being outsiders stuck at the bottom forever. Those who shoot for positions of power are crushed by the overt and subtle clan elitism. Strong lineages rule the world, and the Caitiff do not know or care without a history to define your existence. How can you be trusted beyond first pickings for the Second Inquisition? Your vampiric lineages also define what makes you weak. A Ventrue cannot eat just anyone, and a Toreador is literally unlikely to freeze in place and stare at a beautiful artwork or get lost in the music, caught in a trance, and with no turning back. A Nosferatu's obfuscation can be overridden by a strong use of auspex, and a Lasombra should be confronted in a brightly lit room. The Caitiff are not bound by such constraints, which makes them unpredictable, and change to the ancient vampires is bad. Too much change for the Anarchs has them confront what they unravel and how the world views them. Without an identity, one can sum up in 2 to 5 words: how can anyone prove your unworth, or worth that for that matter? You are a liability and cannot be trusted. Caitiff princes, all 2 of them, were demoted of their status because of this heightened fear, and few Caitiff may exist within the Camarilla without a sponsor, not a mentor, but someone to supervise and baby them. The Caitiff are abuse survivors, knowing that there is no guaranteed space for them. There are just debatably fewer shit options. What provides better options for the players are disciplines, for the Caitiff have full access, excluding thin blood alchemy for obvious reasons, but what should they be? Well, if you're feeling uninspired, you can choose the suggested default spread found in the revised Camarilla and Anarch guides for, you guessed, 3rd/revised edition. The suggested disciplines are Fortitude, Potence and Presence, which makes sense from a stereotypical Anarch perspective. Fortitude for taking beatings as well as mental abuse, Potence for giving beatings that could possibly cause brain damage, and Presence for the peoples dominate, using subtle influence to get what you want, rather than outright taking their will. But if we're talking about making a character, thinking too early in this guide when I was giving those examples about the clans teaching the child, the Caitiff, the importance of some of their disciplines. Yes, the blood is part of the vampire, but the way they improve is dependent on the vampire and what they deem to be important, focusing on their efforts in a certain direction. A Nosferatu does not want to be seen by anyone because they are ashamed of what they look like is going to be much better with obfuscate than a Nosferatu strutting about with their dick out in the wind, proud of being a freak. They may be better with Potence, tapping into their inhuman aspects. Think about the sire of your caitiff and how they would experience their clan discipline, as well as think about what occurred within the mortal and vampiric life to manifest their other disciplines. If they spent time with animals, they suddenly started understanding how they could speak via animalism. If they have auspex, perhaps they claimed to be a psychic or one of those poor kids who knew which members of their household was coming up the stairs based on the sounds that came up the stairs. Or if they were high up in, say, a board of directors member belonging to a LARP company running away from responsibilities, they may be pretty good at dodging claims and adulting with celerity. Some storytellers may be entitled to not allow caitiff characters access to some of those more unique discipline powers, particularly those associated to the Tzimisce, Ravnos and Salubri. Blood sorcery and Oblivion may be off the table too, and I can understand that line of thinking. These special perks are not handed out willy-nilly, but you could argue that a single dot could be taught as part of those early days of the kindred getting accustomed to things, with education halting once both parties realised something went wrong. I'd encourage storytellers to be a little flexible with this, as the cast of Tremere, Hecata and Lasombra ideas would bring lots of exciting spice to the table. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways you can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. Alleycat is the most obvious fit, as plenty of caitiff are beggars and beggars cannot be choosers, though some with closer ties to their humanity and life in general may want to seek permission first, via consensualist or cleaver, depending on their age and the general concept. Scene Queen would be a good fit for a caitiff from a subculture, or feeding amongst those chosen mortal families found in the addition to Roadside Killer from Let the Streets Run Red. There is also plenty of caitiff to see themselves as the next step in the vampiric evolution, so Osiris may aid in this strange endeavour. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, and the caitiff have quite a lot to choose from, as there is no real stereotype to lean on, as any caitiff concept is as wide, deep and thick as your mother, but I have a few leaping off points, as it were. Caitiff that are trying to climb up the Camarilla ranking should explore some of the ones available in the Camarilla and Chicago by Night for any character to latch onto and do favours for, similarly with Anarch-related ones in Anarch and some of the Chicago by Night books, such as Juggler from Let the Streets Run Red. The caitiff may find a new home in the various cults found in Cult of the Blood Gods, Children of the Blood, Trails of Ash and Bone, and Forbidden Religions, as well as the Cult of Mithras from Camarilla. Finally, caitiff that may wish to play into being a harbinger of the end times may want to consider Plagues of Gehenna from Forbidden Religions and Blood Plague from Anarch. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers and mechanics that work with and against them. These are just my takes, and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan-less? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make the concept just a little spicy? Let me know into the comments below. Shape change, fight, stalk, prowl, endure. These 5 words of power are used to define the ferals, the Gangrel, or do they actually? I am your Lord and Saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. The Gangrel are descendants of the antediluvian Honoria, whose possible sires are the Dracon, Enoch, or even Lilith, for Honoria's name supposedly means the female half of God, which is where that interesting origin lies. The tales of the inception of the clan are vast and varied, most of which are covered in the proper Gangrel Lore by Night guide, but they mostly revolve around Honoria wandering around, embracing warriors or other forms of travellers and letting them get on with it, something that really hasn't changed since. Many of these tales depict a bitter rivalry with the Ravnos antediluvian Zapathasura, whilst a common idea presents Honoria fucking some wolves and her childer, the future Gangrel, be the result in addition to the Guru or Lupine. On the surface, it may seem that none of this provides a lot of detail on who and what they embrace, but it says quite a lot. They are outcasts, nobodies that wouldn't be missed if should they go missing or die. The Gangrel embrace someone and piss off, similarly to how many Brujah go about it. Unlike the rabble, there is a key difference. It is a test of survival. Usually, the sire would embrace the individual as they feed, but only if the prey fights back. The kiss can make this difficult, but to resist and fight against something so much stronger than you really demonstrates your strong will and survival instincts. Now, if you can work things out on your own and not meet your final death by means of the sun, then you are strong enough to learn more, assuming you survive your first winter, which is assuming you are following the most basic of lore, but you're a V5 fan of course, so you're not going to. Even without the aforementioned struggle, those with a fierce desire to survive, even without the proper tutelage, demonstrates the wit and again, survival instinct of the kindred. Therefore, regardless of any experience level, Gangrels are, by their very nature, survivors and fighters. Of course, it helps if they had some experience prior but only have some luxury of toughing it out on the street and or prison. They are hunters, be it wild game in woodland somewhere, an assassination target, or other vampires. Financial wealth is not really an important factor to such individuals, only the bare minimum to survive, whether that is a one-bedroom apartment, a hole in the ground, or a makeshift treehouse, and they have no shame about it. In fact, experienced Gangrel would feel indifferent about it. Why would they care? They are the clan most tied to their beast, and beasts should not be caged up when the world is their domain. There is a reason they are called Clan of the Beast, you know, and these reasons make up most of this idea. There are a few additional things that aid in this claim. Their bane and compulsion make them more bestial, the latter making speech and clothing difficult, whilst the former, the clan weakness, has them protruding animal features and or similar behavioural ties. Clothes are uncomfortable, light sources are too bright, and you feel overwhelmed and can only use minimal words to discuss the most basic of needs and desires. Perhaps you actually sniff the air as you hunt, or maybe the smells of the city and all the grime and smog it brings is too much. The embrace awakens something in all that it corrupts, and for the Gangrel, it's a sense of the wild, though I am very aware I have just described the average autistic experience. Despite the nickname, they are not savages. It lacks a moral composition, and any self-control a hunter without its wits is dead. As for their alternate bane, that is more a Vampire the Requiem thing, so we're going to ignore that totally. That, and if your instinct to survive and be, lack of a better phrase, weirded out when things get hairy is determined and dictated solely by an in-game mechanic, maybe try a different clan and concept. Now, does this mean that every Gangrel was a feral tramp with dreads that might as well have been an urban Tarzan? No, as there are many who do not take to civilization but thrive in it. One of the more interesting changes 5th edition made was to really push the corporate Gangrel being the alpha figure in the boardroom. It's pretty cutthroat in of itself, and what with a lot of nature being demolished, one must adapt to the change of environment or die, and no hunter worth their salt should become the hunted, at least not to the point of extermination. Be excited by it and challenge the foe head on, but don't sit around twiddling your thumbs waiting for the world to end. This isn't well for the Apocalypse 5th edition, you know. The instinct to survive is the main reason why the Gangrel were part of the Camarilla for so long. They were one of the founding clans, not because of any real loyalty, but more so because it made sense. It's a pack mentality, and beasts are safer in numbers. Now, they are anarchs because of the simple idea that anyone that isn't a Camp Sabbat is an anarch, but the Gangrel have always been an independent clan with little organisation. They have their meetings, yes, but you can check out the previously mentioned lore dive for more information. But of course, not all the Gangrel are like this. Some are still dedicated to the Camarilla cause. Obviously, this is a reduced social and political hierarchy for obvious reasons. That, and no Justicar is defending the Gangrel's interests. Xavier was the last Justicar of his clan, serving from 1712 to 1999, which is when he withdrew the clan from the Ivory Tower, supposedly when none of the Justicars didn't believe his tales of melding with Honoria within the soil, who was too one with the earth. Camarilla Gangrel claim perimeters of whatever Camarilla domain they can, only getting political when an ambitious Ventrue tries to push them off their turf or are promoted to Sheriff or Archon, particularly the latter. The position of Archon fits with the nomadic nature of the clan, though it is said to be war savvy, i.e. those with more tactical thinking militarize the Anarchs, but that is for you and the ST to decide. The Gangrel are one of the few clans that have a unique discipline, especially when talking in a 5th edition sense. Protean is arguably the most traditional vampire discipline when you compare to the ye old folklore and the classic tales of Dracula. With it, one can turn into a variety of animals, which are usually limited to wolves, birds and bats, as well as the ability to sink into the soil and turn into mist. On the surface, without analysis, it is just a power that blurs the lines of vampirism and shapeshifting, but let's put it into the context of everything we have discussed so far. Honoria, the first Gangrel, was cursed by Cain, as were all the 3rd generation. The curse placed upon Honoria is the manifestation of animal features and the post-like frenzy, when the vampire is at their most natural self, before succumbing to wassail, to become a wight. Protean is one of the many facets of this curse, designed to strip away the veneer of humanity that kindred maintain to blend into mortal society. The ability to transform one's body and mind in ways that defy mortal understanding of logic and reason. Protean exposes the raw and primal nature of their innermost being, revealing the true face of the beast that lurks within their soul. It is a double-edged sword that grants immense power at the cost of one's morality and ultimately their sanity. The more a vampire uses Protean to indulge their dark desires and unleash their primal urges, the more they risk losing touch of their humanity and becoming a mindless monster driven solely by hunger and rage. Naturally, many see Protean as a gift rather than a curse, a chance to embrace their true nature and shed the shackles of mortal morality. They revel in the raw power and exhilaration that comes with unleashing the beast within, the exhilarating thrill of the hunt, even as the risk of losing themselves to the darkness of their own suffering. For most, however, it is but a tool at the hunter's belt. Regardless of outlook, Protean is a reminder of the eternal struggle between the animalistic and the civilized, the primal and the rational, and the instinctual and the moral, one should say. The other tools or disciplines the Gangrel have are animalism and fortitude, and one of those is more expected than the other. Animalism is often a must for the Gangrel, who use animals to spy, hunt, and attack their foes, but rare is it for the Gangrel to feed upon their own, which extends upon any mortals they regally frequent. Most animals don't shit where they eat, and the Gangrel are no exception to that. It also goes against their nature to feed on animals. The Gangrel are far superior to most animals, so the hunt has quite the unfair balance. As with fortitude, you would expect hunters to be naturally equipped with potence when you consider they are a clan of the wild, where travelling across harsh terrains and endure the worst hunting tools the modern human can throw at them. So, with this in mind, it makes sense that fortitude would manifest within the Gangrel, as they are naturally going to expect a lot of pain and suffering. Fortitude is a supernatural endurance, and there is no telling how long their mission, for lack of a better phrase, will be, but they certainly won't want to rush it. Besides, they have claws and fangs that make ends meet. Potence is just overkill. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways you can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. Alicat seems the most obvious, as they are mostly individuals who spend lots of time on the streets. It shouldn't matter who or what takes your foe. Hunting vampires may be your more forte, so picking off kindred via the bloodleech predator type may be the choice for you, though this has far more risks involved, which I'm sure I don't need to explain. That said, I am not suggesting you should play as Diabolarists. From a player perspective, that is just childish, and if you want a power game or play superheroes, play D&D or Mage. From a mature vampiric perspective, playing a kindred that is aware they are close to their beast, then others would naturally avoid Diabolary at all costs. Whilst the needs of the beasts are indeed paramount, the beast does not become stronger to increase in power, yes, but it only wishes to survive and trust solely on instinct. This means that they are not inherently cruel by any means, as death by the Aramanth is a terrifying concept with far too many risks for the Diabolist to be. A failed Diablerie causes the soul to control the attempted Diabolist, which essentially kills the individual. Again, survival is one's first concern, but for a shred of simpler, cleaner evidence to dismiss the foolish narrative, most vampires do not kill when they feed. But I digress. Pursuer, from the player's guide, really has the player focus the hunt in a mechanical sense, stalking their prey, rather than leaving it up to roleplay for some reason. The roadside killer predator type, from Let the Streets Run Red, gives a bit more focus than the alley cat predator type, but also allows one to give some function to the nomad lifestyle. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here are some of the ones I think fit well with tonight's clan. If you want to associate your character with some of the big cheeses within the Anarchs of 5th edition, try putting some dots into the Theo Bell, Rudy from the core book, and Agatha Stark and Salvador Garcia from the Anarch book. But also from the Anarch book, we have the actual Anarch Revolt, perfect for those campfire story moments, and Rudy, who is a Gangrel aligned with the Anarchs. There are a few Gangrel specific lore sheets too, mainly Descendant of Xavier and the 5th dot in the Mark Decker lore sheets from the Anarch sourcebook and Let the Streets Run Red respectively. While we're on the Chicago-based sourcebook, maybe you wish to look at the lore sheet for Juggler from Let the Streets Run Red if your Gangrel is Anarch leaning. The Goblin Roads from Chicago Folios may also appeal to more travel-focused Gangrel. Meanwhile, in the core book, the Low Clan lore sheet may apply to your concept and the general themes of the Chronicle. From Chicago by Night, there are quite a few that may apply to Gangrel on both sects. Continuing with the Anarchs, kindred iconography may be one to consider, as V5 has a small focus on vampires using code to highlight locations and meanings which would be adopted easily by the Gangrel. The Gangrel and Lupines have had a tight history together throughout the setting, particularly in Chicago, and your character may be aware of this via the Lupine Expert and a newbie lore sheets, the latter coming from Let the Streets Run Red. However, I will state this now because I already know that someone is gagging to say this. The Gangrel and Guru fucking hate each other. The truce in Chicago does not mean they like each other. Outcasts may want to obtain the Waneka lore sheet, as the Nosferatu in question deals mainly with any outcast that will pay mind to him. As I mentioned them earlier, the Archon's lore sheet may be a good fit for your nomadic yet law-abiding kindred, as would be Justicar Lucinde and Agent of Justicar Parr from Fall of London and Chicago Folios respectively, but wish to go at it all the time. If you want less focus but still some focus on your travelling Gangrel, perhaps if you take the idea of delivering contraband and cargo but not so keen on fighting, the Pony Express from Chicago Folios is best for you. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers, and mechanics that work with and against them. Now, these are just my takes and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make the concept just a little bit spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Resurrect. Summon and bind ghosts. Investigate. Research. Surveil. These 7.5 words of power are used to define the clans and bloodlines of death, the Hecata. Or do they actually? I am your Lord and Saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. Before we properly begin, please carefully note the wording in my previous opening statement. The Hecata are composed of various clans and bloodlines. They are not one clan, and anyone portraying them as such is not only wrong in this understanding, but also playing the game wrong. I know we're all free to play the game how we want to and interpret things differently, but this is one of few exceptions to this rule, as it is clearly stated in Cult of the Blood Gods, which is the first full inclusion that the Hecata is provided, that if a player enters a V5 game referring to themselves as one of the Hecata and doesn't state a bloodline or clan, then it should be assumed they are one of the Cappadocians or Harbingers of Skulls, or Ashur for the slightly updated title for the OG clan of death and de facto rulers of the Hecata. And even then, there is a remarkable difference between the two, at least in attitude, but you can check out my lore episodes on both of those for more info. But that is why you're here, to have a better understanding of the bunch and thus improve your roleplay, which is fantastic. But who the fuck are they? Well, it all starts as all things vampiric tend to do, with their progenitor, the antediluvian Cappadocius, or Ashur, depending on who you ask. This vampire, who you may or may not be a wraith chilling in the underworld now, wanted to learn everything he could about death, the before, during, and after, and everything else in between. He would embrace others into his flock to pursue this as well, with varying degrees of success, by which I mean some chose to look into that, and others played politics with their bosom buddies, the Ventrue. Daddy Death didn't like this so much, and decided to lock away a large chunk of his clan away in a mountain somewhere, which probably wasn't the first time he did this, but this particularly noting of this imprisonment would be the last. These Cappadocians would eventually become the Harbingers of Skulls, alongside the Cappadocians that ran away to Egypt with Lazarus, briefly forming the Lazarenes. In between all of this, Lazarus would embrace and create the Lamia, a mostly all-female, whether outwardly presenting or of spirit, would serve and protect the Cappadocians. The Giovanni would be brought into all of this via an embrace of Augustus from Ashur, who, as I'm sure every VTM fan knows, was kinda diabolized by Augustus, who, alongside the Giovanni, would hunt the Cappadocians and Lamia into near extinction, but staying out of the way of the Camarillers' politics as part of the promise of 1528, creating a bunch of revenant families in the process to further their dominance. It can be assumed, but not confirmed, that the Samedi are some of the surviving Cappadocians that hid in the Caribbean, though you can listen to my lore episode on them to hear some of my other theories. The Lamia of today are of a slightly different origin in that a Bahari priestess that somehow survived the genocide. At some point, the neonate and ancillary of these clans grew tired of their elders doing 50 shades of fuck all, putting the neonates in the firing line and not gaining any real power. These neonates didn't have all the same hatred of the rivals as their elders did, and if they did, it was only through rumour and story. The whispers of the Cappadocian, the de facto heads of the soon-to-be Hecata, all Cappadocians mind you, stoked the embers of revolution, causing the neonates to revolt, who may or may not have destroyed Augustus Giovanni. No one is quite too sure. Combined with the rise of the Second Inquisition, it made some degree of sense to flock together under a barely hanging banner. You may have noticed the Nagaraja have been very absent from this tale, which is partly because they had very little to do with any of these necromancers. In fact, they are not descendants of Cappadocius or Augustus Giovanni, but a bunch of death mages that were dicking about with Setite blood to try and obtain immortality, as the allure of a curse from a mummy isn't good enough apparently. They too would join the Hecata to minimize being destroyed by the SI. So you understand now there are many faces to the Hecata, much like their logo, which is clearly a reference to the goddess of necromancy, Hecate, who too has 3 heads, or sometimes 3 bodies, though they're not always human in design. I'm sure most people knew this already, but they may not know why this was a choice besides the ancient Greek Easter egg, so to speak. The trio of heads or bodies is meant to symbolize her as the guardians of borders, city walls, doorways, crossroads, and of course, realms outside or beyond the world of the living. She is often associated with being between, and hence is often referred to as a liminal goddess. Liminal deities oversee various transitional states, including the shift from the old to the new, the movement from the unconscious to the conscious state, and the transition from the familiar to the unfamiliar. In the case of Hecate, she, like many others, descends into the underworld, crossing the threshold between life and death and existing in between it. This is a sentiment that is to be used to explain the existence of vampires. They are neither dead nor living, but the Hecata have the tools to find out why and what happens in between, dying and living outside of the vampiric existence. The Cappadocians were often portrayed in older editions of vampires harbouring this respect, so too with their Lame and the focus on the four humours, as well as with the Samedi, albeit with more voodoo and voodoo focuses, meaning the shift is on the spiritual side within the Shadowlands, rather than the physical dying within the Skinlands. The Giovanni and Nagaraja, however, do not care for most of that. They want power and control, and they use their blood to make ends meet, or in the case of the Nagaraja, as quick little snacks when they're in a pinch. All of this and more is done through the vampiric necromantic talents that is known as Oblivion in V5, which, despite the insistence of its real-world creator, I will stand on my hill and insist that is a really different from the Lasombra variant, as the treated of the underworld and the abyss, or hell, are different in many tales of mythic proportion, both in and out of the world of darkness. Both brands of Oblivion use cripple the draining sanity of the wielder, but in very different ways. The Lasombra's use has them confront the darkness and stare into it. The abyss stares back, loaning the Lasombra powers that stain their humanity as they manipulate the darkness, a natural order instilled by God, a reminder they and their powers are not a natural order of things. The Oblivion of the Hecata reinforces they are oxymorons of existence, the puppeteers of the deceased and little gods of entropy, both forever the playthings of the Hecata. Almost, or if not all, of the clans and bloodlines of the Hecata have strong religious ties, which adds to a strange catharsis when you discover something new, whether it is a success or not. Both forms of Oblivion provide answers that demand more questions, but one is technically easier for the mortal mind to comprehend than the other. So, whilst all that may be fine and dandy for anyone looking for an analysis of design choices, the vast majority of die-hard V5 fans barely read the books. So, what does any of this have to do with roleplay? Well, to put it plainly, if you, as a mortal, you kind of need an interest in death, though it would be ideal if you are obsessed with it. But given Kindred as some of the world's biggest groomers, it won't be long until you are fashioned into this way of thinking, unless you are that rare sort that has embraced for your emotion and humanly passion to fill a hole and role in the dysfunctional family that make up the Hecata. And if that doesn't help, the Cappadocian will, and before you ask, they have all the Giovanni painful kiss and the Samedi don't stink, unless you want them to, which is very easy to incorporate. On the topic of decay, ignore the alternate bane. Quite frankly, it's fucking stupid, much like the rest of the player's guide. In this is so much of the nuance regarding the Hecata, as well as the rules regarding different bloodlines and their disciplines, something I missed in my review of the player's guide. But I digress. The Hecata are amongst the elite when it comes to this sort of conditioning, which they have to be, as necromancy for many years has been a dark, forbidden art, as well as the general mafia-styled structures of the Giovanni. Similar privileged mindsets come from the other bloodlines, as the Nagaraja, Cappadocian and Harbingers of Skulls have had very cult-like approaches to their special embraces and rituals, as do the Lamie. The Samedi wouldn't embrace just anyone either, given the privileged nature of practicing and teaching voodoo and voodoo, so it is very rare for an impromptu Hecata embrace to occur within the family, though that could be a very interesting tale to tell. The obsession of death can come in many different ways, be it those who have an interest in the occult or necromancy itself, crime bosses who flirt with death through their illegal activities, or someone who studies it in a scientific sense. The Giovanni still continue to embrace their own human bloodlines, with some of the revenants distancing themselves from that, some with more success than others. Some may also experience death through other means, from gangsters, serial killers, or just regular undertakers. One should also be reminded that many Western members of the Hecata are religious, which proposes different theories and feelings on those death as part of their faith, with each adherent, for lack of a better word, with stronger faiths than others. Many Cappadocians begin to serve as seneschals once more, and the Samedi ally themselves with the Anarchs via the ministry. Some even work for the Camarilla, if the pay is right. My point is that each occupation adds something to the structure of the clan, and each soul can contribute to the clan's dominance of the underworld and more. Mundane criminal activities, most of which are devoid of any compassion and certainly no empathy. Remember, the crime structure has been the norm within the Hecata for decades, dare I say centuries. They have the underworld proper and the underworld of cities wrapped round their fingers. A constant dealing and toying with death makes one rather detached from humanity and society. Whilst this is not an excuse to play any vampire as a nihilistic edgelord, the shock value of seeing someone or thing dead, the life fade from their eyes, or their brains splattered in all physical possible directions, does wear down after a while. Yes, vampires are neither dead nor living, but most would rather avoid the trauma of killing someone, and even less would be a bit remiss about toying with their souls. As one of the Hecata, you have to be resolute to get shit down and done, usually putting your needs on the back burner. So that's a lot about Oblivion in regards to the V5 Hecata, but what about their other disciplines? Well, sticking with the default 2, Auspex is very much a spirit-related one too, mainly through the later powers that can aid in discovering and predicting the death of others. It helps them to plan and coordinate, as the Hecata are not reckless. They cannot afford to be. Fortitude, as Cult of the Blood Gods notes, reflects the more coarsely pallor of the Hecata, a nod to the Cappadocian weakness, as well as being somewhat closer to death than others of the blood. Then there are the other ones available. A Giovanni can have Dominate instead of Auspex, omitting Potence, which belongs to the Lamie, who can gain that over Auspex too. Mechanically, it makes sense for the bloodlines not to share disciplines, though the Nagaraja can get Dominate instead of Fortitude, so I guess that doesn't matter too much. The Lamie are the fighters and should get the strength-focused one. Dominate for the Giovannis makes sense, given the whole thing is complete control, which makes me wonder if they ever made Necromancy a Dominate Algamam, a control over the dead. Nah, that would be silly. No 5th edition writer would ever use that logic for a classic VTM discipline. Despite not bearing their usual decrepit state, the Samedi can have Obfuscate instead of Fortitude, which paints them as the more secretive bunch, which they are. Older editions would paint Samedi as assassins and hitman, and what a way to go than Beholder of Death. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways you can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. It goes without saying that the ones introduced in Cult of the Blood Gods, Extortionist and Grave Robber, were literally made for the Hecata, so it would be weird not to give those a spin, though Extortionist may be a little tricky to master. Alleycat can offer similar aggressive vibes, but without the added nuance of politics whilst feeding. It also makes sense if you are a gangster that doesn't give a fuck. Grim Reaper is the less interesting version of Grave Robber, but if that's your jam, enjoy that from the player's guide. Bagger might provide an interesting twist if you are a physician that doesn't want to disturb the flesh of the potential subject. Osiris and Sin Queen are the other options for more cult-focused characters, especially the former, as that is exactly what it's made for. Giovanni characters that are a bit full of themselves, or some more conservative asshats would call pure, may only wish to feed on their own kin, which would make a Cleaver an interesting fit. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here are some of the ones I think fit well with tonight's clans and bloodlines. The unique Hecata bloodline ones are seemingly obvious choice, but they are also not needed to roleplay a member of said clan or bloodline. They're just there to provide additional flavour and goodies. The feel of the bloodline in question comes from you and the storyteller, but mainly you. Any of the lore sheet that revolves around a cult from any book makes the most sense, particularly those from Cult of the Blood Gods and their stretch goal books, Children of the Blood, Trails of Ash and Bone, and Forbidden Religions, as well as the few found in the Chicago by Night who, in terms of cult material, walked so Cult of the Blood Gods could run. Lore enthusiasts would be aware of the ties between the Cappadocians and the Book of Nod, or rather a specific print of it, so a more occult-focused Hecata could make use of that in their chronicle. But going back to the Hecata sourcebook of Deathly Wonders, most of the Cult of the Blood God lore sheets fit the Hecata like a glove because, again, they were designed with the Hecata in mind. The Cappadocians once had close ties to Mithras via his cult, so players may wish to explore the cult of Mithras from the Camarilla sourcebook. Hecata characters also have the option of becoming a descendant of Roger de Camden from the Loresheet of the same name from the Trails of Ash and Bone. Hecata players wanting to get a leg up in the Camarilla or Anarch kindred can also choose any Loresheet relating to any high authority kindred, usually ones belonging to the Camarilla if you're anything but a Samedi, who could focus more on Anarch specific ones. Gangsters amongst the Hecata wanting to live through the glorious days of Capone can via the Capone Gang Loresheet. It is not uncommon to find Hecata dabble in blood sorcery, so the Vienna Zero Loresheet from Blood Sigils may be worth checking out if you want blood sorcery to be a theme in your Hecata character and story. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers, and mechanics that work with and against them. These are just my takes, and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make the concept just a little bit spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Command. Persevere. Achieve. Cheat. Puppeteer. These 5 words of power are used to describe the Night Clan, the Lasombra, or do they actually? I am your Lord and Saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. The Lasombra are creatures of darkness, much like their vampiric cousins. Unlike the other kindred, I mean it rather literally. The progenitor of the clan, the Lasombra antediluvian Lasombru, to use one of his 400 possible names, possess mastery over the shadows and darkness, calling forth the nothingness of the abyss to manipulate the shadows and darkness around them, a taint that would corrupt every descendant thereafter. The earliest of the clan would travel across the seas and dominate Rome and the religious and institutions that would indoctrinate Europe afterwards. Alongside the Tzimisce, the Lasombra would instigate the Anarch revolt, be the sword of the Sabbat, as well as provoke the Inquisition into being. The Americas would feel their might, leading the Sword of Cain into greatness, but as the Second Inquisition would rise and the Sabbat would falter, the Amici Noctis, the Friends of the Night, the heads of the Lasombra, would take just under half of the clan into the Camarilla, their enemies of some 500 years, taking their influence of the Church and their black magics with them. It is easy to make direct comparisons to the Ventrue, how the Magisters are the darkness to the Ventrue's light, but such a statement would get you shot. They are both rulers and seek dominance, but there is a huge difference between their motives. The Ventrue are egotistical, believing it is their birthright to rule. Cain made Ventrue rule Enoch, and so too must his descendants. They are a crude caricature of the monarchy and capitalism. The Lasombra are simultaneously much easier to understand and far more nuanced. Clan Lasombra prioritize their personal success over gaining power of status. Strength is the key to the success of the Lasombra, and they are willing to make any sacrifice to achieve it. Put a pin in that, we'll come back to that. While they use spirituality as a means to an end, they do not seek true enlightenment. This devotion to the cause is seen with the most recent of Lasombra plotlines, which has less than half the clan defect to the Camarilla, showing their loyalties to their ideologies rather than sect affiliations. Lasombra anti-tribu have always been a theme in VTM metaplot since the inception of the sects. Montaro, child of Lasombru, has always been with the Camarilla, and many followed. Despite the grander exodus, the themes for Camarilla aligned have not changed in terms of motivation. The Lasombra will win the jihad, they just have a different tool to forward their agendas. There is no love for the tower, for it is barely more than palatable than the Sword of Cain. Their existence is one of inches and degrees. These Lasombra see the Sabbat as a failure and no longer worthy of their control, which is why the Friends of the Night pulled from the Sabbat. The survival of the clan was greater than the goals of the faction they started. By joining their enemies rather than becoming an independent faction, they believe the Sabbat must go. It all speaks volumes of the determination for their persistence, and whoever they introduce into the clan next next, and who Sabbat Lasombra and possibly the sect as a whole will target first. If your Lasombra is a character who remembers the Sabbat, think about what it must have been like and how you managed to cope in more inhumane circumstances then and more humane circumstances now. At least what vampires believe humanity should be, rather than actually emulating it. Do you dress and act like your former Sabbat self, or do you try to blend in more? There is also the matter in which the Lasombra exist in the Camarilla now, especially for the younger neonate, unaware of the traumas of those who were embraced into the Sabbat. It is known that in the city of Chicago, a Camarilla domain, for every Lasombra to be embraced, an elder must be sacrificed. This is described in Chicago by Night, 5th edition, as well as the visual novel Shadows of New York, which appears to follow a similar condition. This, however, is not the same across all Camarilla domains, as discussed in Chicago by Night. Discuss with the storyteller and vice versa about these conditions, how many are you and how your character feels about all of this, how they deal with the burden of some 500 years of hatred, manipulation and tyranny. There is no denying that the Lasombra and indeed many other vampires who fought in the Anarch Revolt have become what they have despised, manipulative elders that thrive on abuse and torment. The Lasombra that became the Sabbat would continue to thrive in the Sabbat or Camarilla, and not shake off the shackles of their size, but embraced them. The true Lasombra in this case would be the very few that are the ones in the Anarchs, though both Camarilla and Sabbat Lasombra would deem those true failures. They are devoid of their legacy, lost causes with no ambition or decisive thinking. They are just not shameful but an insult to the clan, not that it would bother said Anarch. The elders of the Camarilla and Sabbat are cowards, feeding their young into the gaping maw of the Second Inquisition. Even among the Anarchs, the Lasombra show a great deal of cunning and deception, just like their Sabbat and Camarilla brethren. They just value their independence more than anything else. They are the thinkers and planners of the Anarch philosophies, passionate about the cause. That doesn't mean, however, the Lasombra Anarchs are not afraid to get their hands dirty and engage in conflict when necessary, which even their critics must acknowledge. Much like the younger Camarilla traitors, there is plenty of rage and frustration to be had, just the moral compass of each springs wildly in opposite directions. Regardless of sect affiliation, the Lasombra has always embraced people whom they considered to be ruthless, determined for their success above all else, and willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to achieve it. When it comes to the embrace, it is their humanity that must go. Lasombra tear down their future child's lifestyle, tearing them apart from their loved ones, crumbling their enterprises, and rebuilding them anew in things that matter to the clan. Though it is really the child that has to establish themselves in Canaanite society. Sure, the Sire could forcibly embrace them, but what good is that? No lesson has been learned, and without this guidance, the Lasombra to be would fail, and failures should not take up space. Whether you are a mercenary, a rabbi, a journalist, or something a bit more esoteric like a fitness guru, you will excel at it because anything else is insignificant. If your coterie and any of their mortal contacts, allies, and touchstones don't describe you as callous, then there is still a lot of work to be done. You don't need a stupid bane or compulsion to do this either. Remember that everyone is a tool for you, and you are alone. The most unique of these tools is the brand of Oblivion that allows the Lasombra to manipulate and weave the shadows to their will, making a soul pact with the Abyss, another plane of existence that you might as well call Hell. It is an alien power with alien properties that scare and stain away your humanity. Something that I say is as thematic and mechanical as getting certain rolls on your rouse checks. Using these type of Oblivion powers inflicts stains on your humanity, which it should. There are many comments and discussions to be had regarding the coldness of these applications of Oblivion, but it should be agreed that these powers are not yours, but those of another dimension, on loan, whilst the Oblivion of the Hecata does not incur such stains. campaigns. I argue that it should if you're going to haphazardly slap the two together. Now, I've said this in my Hecata guide, but I will stand on my hill and insist that it is really different from the Lasombra variant, as the treating of the underworld and the abyss, or hell, are different in many tales of mythic proportion, both in and out of the world of darkness. Both brands of Oblivion use cripple the draining sanity of the wielder, but in very different ways. The Lasombra use has them confront the darkness and stare into it. The abyss stares back, loaning the Lasombra powers that stain their humanity as they manipulate the darkness, a natural order instilled by God, a reminder that they and their powers are not a natural order of things. The Oblivion of the Hecata reinforces they are oxymorons of existence, the puppeteers of the deceased and little gods of entropy, both forever the plaything of the Hecata. Almost all the clans and bloodlines have strong religious ties, those of the Hecata I mean, and to an extent of the Lasombra, which adds to a strange catharsis when you discover something new, whether it is a success or not. Both forms of Oblivion provide answers that demand more questions, but one is easier for the mortal mind to comprehend than the other. With regards to the other two disciplines of the Lasombra, Potence and Dominate, they further amplify their difference from the Ventrue, as well as the attitude of the Lasombra themselves. The Blue Bloods, the Ventrues, have fortitude and presence. The former they use to bulk up with fortitude as they are forced into a fight, but the Keepers live for combat as they happily practice potence. The Ventrue draw attention to themselves with presence, making themselves the voices of reason or the authority to be feared, depending on the circumstance, whilst the Lasombra hide and stalk with Oblivion, manipulating from afar if need be, but they are not afraid to take someone down up close either, as already ascertained. The use of Dominate between the other two differs. The Ventrue use Dominate to demand loyalty. The Lasombra use Dominate to get results, another reminder of the core differences. What separates both of these clans is their attachment to humanity, or the lack of thereof in the case of most Lasombra. Both are malicious, but one could be arguably more inhumane than the other. After all, you needn't be a CEO, king, or a president to rule after all. A good leader exercises control. Anyone can bark and shout orders about with next to no prevail. Obedience without such measures is the mark of a true master, and the Lasombra are the true masters of control. And the one thing they cannot control in 5th edition is their appearance on digital recordings, something that I personally have mixed feelings about. On the one hand, it makes sense. The Lasombra, since their inception, have always been unable to see their reflection, be it a puddle and mirror, so it makes sense that the next step in that part of the Lasombra story as society transitions into the digital age. It further amplifies the point of the Lasombra and, to use a legacy term for a moment, the obtenebration they wield not being allowed to exist in harmony with the physical world. Like all Banes, it is not something that they can control and use, a weakness of the clan that forces them to overcome and adapt this blight, forcing many to venture into thralling ghouls, something to use in a tricky situation. It is not a hacker power, their Banes I mean. It is not even a power, it is a fault in their blood. Yet, I have seen many players, including my own, what constitutes as a tech fucking up ability, but wanting to become a 19th hacker person surfing the deep web with their powers at any and everything. This obviously kills the mood and tension of the clan as well as the game itself, and I don't think it is unreasonable for an ST to clamp down before it spreads into something nasty and infectious. Now, if the player does insist on doing something they believe to be clever, and you don't want to clamp down straight away but just work straight up to it, do what I do and borrow Legacy Edition's Way of the Apocalypse and have the player look for failures instead. If the player fails the associated tech roll, then the thing they want to fuck up happens, to show it is a fail state. Now, if they succeed in the roll, something worse happens. Instead of shutting down the security, every guard, monitor, and their mother is pointing at your exact location. Instead of sending a secret text message in Elysium, some random hunter now has your number. Your players will love and hate you for it, but it should make them think twice about trying to cheat the system. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways you can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. Alleycat and Bloodleech are the most obvious ones, with the latter useful if you want a Sabbat Cainite who got a bit addicted to the whole Diablerie thing, which is not me saying you should go around Diablerizing Ron, that is just silly. The Sabbat are cruel, with some of their games involving bloodthirsty chases, making Montaro an interesting choice. Stalker might be another player guide's choice, should your Lasombra really enjoy the company of the shadows. For those wanting to blend in more but not sure how, a Lasombra trying to blend in may find the Scene Queen a better fit, feeding safely amongst mortals you deem to be safe. With many of the cults that have popped up during the V5 plotline, Osiris may be an interesting choice for this as well. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here are some of the ones I think fit well with tonight's clan. Jumping off of the Predator type list, many of the cults mentioned in the various Onyx Path publishing books, as well as the Camarilla book, can provide many cults for the Lasombra to mingle and to become a part of, maybe even run with the right choices. The First Inquisition, Sect War Veteran from the core book, and Anarch Revolt from Anarch all connect the Lasombra to the original anarchists, and an older Lasombra, proud of their history, or a younger one trying to prove a point, may benefit from having some dots in any of these. Lasombra, unable to shake the ties of their old Sabbat days, may wish to cling to the past of the Book of Nod Loresheet from Chicago by Night, or Kindred Dueling from Chicago Folios, which is essentially ye old monomancy, but don't tell anyone that. The Lasombra are also a high clan, so choosing that from the core book may benefit the snobs amongst you. On the flip side, anyone who wants to try and get further involved with the Camarilla may want to hook up with one of the various NPCs mentioned in Camarilla and Chicago by Night via their various lore sheets, but keep in mind that it's highly likely you're going to be their little bitch. Traditionally, you won't have a high position of power in Camarilla courts, but there is no reason why you can't bend things to your liking, providing the ST approves, and you can certainly work towards that in-game. Chicago by Night offers you the chance to be a descendant of Montaro via the lore sheet of the same name, which is the only Lasombra-only lore sheet at the time of recording. You can also be connected to Tally via his lore sheet. Whilst implied not involving the Lasombra, the Court of Shadows lore sheet from Fall of London can also be a Lasombra-focused group, if you so choose. It would make an interesting twist to the Friends of Night, but British, innit? There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers and mechanics, and work with and against them. These are just my takes and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make the concept just a little bit spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Perceive, comprehend, confound, soothsay, foretell. These 5 words of power are used to describe the clan of the Moon, the Malkavians, or do they actually? I am your Lord and Saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. The Malkavians are descendants of the vampiric antediluvian Malkav, a seer embraced by either Zillar or Enoch, though you may hear him described as a descendant of Lilith, or even an angel. What is known is that he is one of the oldest 3rd generation Cainites who has ascended the planes of mortal realms and exists as the infamous Madness Network, blessing and cursing his children with maddening prophetic sights of the past, future, and everything else in between. His clan, Clan Malkavian, are thus a mysterious and deeply troubled group of vampires. They have taken on the roles of visionaries and prophets among their kind and humans alike, eerie figures who are controlled by strange forces and possess the ability to perceive things that others cannot. They are also infamous for their pranks, ranging from petty and harmless to maliciously cruel. Despite their reputation amongst the kindred as the Mad Bunch, one of the oldest vampire clans still survive to this day. They were also instrumental in establishing the powerful Camarilla and are known as one of its pillars in the modern times. There is a lot to unpack here, as is the case of anyone with any amount of trauma, but the Malkavians are amongst the most traumatized of vampires within the world of darkness. Malkav was a seer, but he knew this. It was the blood of Cain, a curse from Cain or a message from Lilith that shattered his mind, but he was not a murdered individual prior to this. He gave visions and advice to his brethren of the blood. The infamous madness of the Malkavians would come so much later. When his mind broke, his descendants would feel it forevermore. But the mortals the Malkavians embrace are not those with poor taste who would describe as raving lunatics. Sure, there are those amongst the clan who fit the description, but a mad clan the Malkavians are not, despite the conflicting messages found in the metaplot of Vampire the Masquerade, particularly 5th edition, the very focus of this guide and series. The Cassandras in Mortal Life do not discriminate who they embrace, but they do focus on intellect, as that would be needed to dissect visions aplenty, but it also gives them a firm footing in the Camarilla, already having some degree of influence, so it makes the concepts rather large. Another factor connecting them is that most have some sort of hard luck tale or dark secret that the sire is aware of, something they, sire and child, can work towards or exploit. In other words, they are disturbed in some sense, often without a lot of self-esteem, though the inverse can be true. Whilst it is not always the case, people with trauma can have high emotional intelligence and empathy, many of whom want to understand the truth about themselves, which makes them their own self-imposed detective and psychologist. Degeneration of the mind is guaranteed when a Malkavian embraces, so someone with lots of mental fortitude and lots to give before becoming one of the Nord, non-functional Malkavians, unfit for kindred society. The embrace for most is traumatic. Dying, coming back to life, realizing you have lost it all and will be at the bottom for a very, very long time. The Malkavians endure this and then are flooded with visions only they can see. Sometimes it won't be places and people, but sensations and smells, vibes and feelings that they barely understand themselves, let alone any way they choose to part said information. Why should they? The Malkavian possess all the answers but none of the questions, one day but a completely different set tomorrow. That in of itself is maddening, both for the vampire themselves and anyone who witnesses any mental breakdowns the Malkavian has from the visions, on top of the existence of being a vampire and on top of any mental illnesses that spread like a cancer since the embrace. Once the Malkavians were valued for their oracle abilities, but with the rise of Christianity, such powers are not only satanic, but a sign of weakness and madness. True visions come from God, the big G himself. Science replaced faith with reason. You can't be sure it will work, the math doesn't add up. In other words, you're a weirdo, and society shuns anything with the width of individuality, mocking alternate solutions that aren't immediately understood. The Malkavians are a pillar of the Camarilla, but one when it suits the prince or council member. The rest of the time, they are the joke clan, the lowest of the low clans, just about able to be the performing monkey of Elysium. Now, many Malkavians become bitter and resentful, understandably so. Their hand is forced to join the Anarchs, unchained by the Tower, hence the 5th edition title for the Anarch-aligned Malkavians, Unchained Malkavians. However, such a title is a double-edged sword. An unchained Malkavian is a stereotypical lunatic, free to use dementation and spread the madness they were discouraged to in the Camarilla, with many Anarch kindred once belonging to the Sabbat, so take that how you will. The other side of things is the more obvious answer, and that is that they are free from the stigma of the Tower, but alas, similar distasteful songs are sung about the Malkavians within the movement. The hot-tempered and trigger-happy Anarchs need answers, not riddles, and morose Malkavians with visions is not what they need. They need action. The emotional well-being of the Malkavians may be so dire that they simply lack the will or spoons to take up arms and fight, but if they do, the disciplines makes them an interesting asset to subvert and madden the opposition, which makes the Unchained Malkavians, at best, tolerable. Is it really any wonder why the Malkavians are perceived as mad? Supernatural visions feed into mortal thoughts and understanding, morphing the brain into an unfixable mess. Some respond by creating herds that are more loyal than any other for a sense of belonging and leadership. It's common in the VTM fiction to have Malkavians run or stalk hospitals and mental clinics, and whilst part of that is very much a stereotypical spooky vibe, it provides some comfort knowing there are others who experience snippets that you endure. At the same time, it doesn't help there are others you cannot fix, people who will not be listened. Despite the progress, mental health is still a taboo subject in many places. Women are called liars, children are told not to cry, and men are told to man up. We are taught to suppress our feelings, but when we snap, it's the victim's fault. Society is not the guilty party, but the judge, jury, and occasionally executioner. It should be no surprise that, as a response or sheer desperation, others seek comfort from their own, or comfort from themselves alone, but the latter is the little lie. It's shutting themselves away, hiding from the world, unable to face all that scares and overwhelms them. The perceived madness of the Malkavians does not define them, but it does shape them. The never-ending visions provide a new context to view the world, but it does not take up the whole existence. I am more than my own traumas and mental illnesses, as are you. What you do and don't do, how you feel and don't feel, and the fragmenting memories of yesteryear define your personality, and how others view you speaks volumes of your character. People embrace people, and the Malkavians are, at the end of the night, people. The Malkavians possess the disciplines Auspex, Dominate, and Obfuscate. Auspex is the all-seeing, all-knowing, and all-trauma-dumping power that makes them the go-to plot device for the ST. Jokes aside, the Malkavian vision manifests through its various powers, and how the character employs them defines the character. Do they rely on Auspex to make them feel important and relevant, helping those in need or service? Or is this something that is viewed with a more passive touch? Do the sights that come on their own accord help or hinder you? If so, how much? Obfuscate will make sense for any recluse that wishes to be ignored, to be deceived when they really feel comfortable with it. On a mechanical level, they deceive the mind, the illusionists before the Ravnos was conceptualized. And of course, they are some of those who use their abilities to pull off fun pranks, silently observe court dynamics, and slip a knife into someone's back. Then there is Dominate, originally taught by the Ventrue and Tremere when forced to give up dementation, for it was too much of a Masquerade violation, and it just isn't proper. Another mind-altering power that forces one to bend the knee or forget as much or as little as the horrors you put someone through, or the consenting party of something troubling that just occurred. More troubled souls would use it to cause mayhem. To that end, whilst the great prank is not mentioned in 5th edition metaplot, dementation is present via an amalgam. Narratively speaking, it implies some are closer to Malkav and his network than others, their minds potentially more broken if we're to be crass about it. It may also imply an allegiance, as the Sabbat and, to an extent, Anarch Malkavians are more likely to wield it than Camarilla kindred. These powers can be embraced fully or rejected, but remember not to trivialize mental health. No one likes a fish milk. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways you can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. Bagger and Sandman offer safe routes for Malkavians wishing for that hospital-themed feed, though Sandman is not exclusive for that fitting. They are both considered more moral choices too, fit for the more traumatized individual. Farmer and Bloodleech offer similar mindsets, though the latter again offers more danger. Nicer still is the consensualist that, as the name implies, asks for permission, which any herd, cult member or patient may oblige to. So would too be family, via Cleaver or Scene Queen, from a select subculture where you feel safe and let your hair down. If feeding on the mentally and physically ill is not your cup of tea, nor are you fond of sipping off blood bags, a twist I may recommend is Grave Robber. With that, you get voices and sounds from beyond the grave, as well as in the mangled consciousness of lunatics, to use the nickname for them. On the flip side, if you want to embrace the idea of choosing the nearly dead and dying, Grim Reaper may be the choice for you too. What all these offer is discreet approaches to best suit the discipline spread, but experiment with it and have fun. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here are some of the ones I think fit well with tonight's clan. A pillar of the Camarilla such as yourself may have information regarding the Convention of Thorns, while someone from the Anarchs that is interested in people and blood distribution may know a thing or two about the circulatory system, both of which comes from the core book. Perhaps you wish to have some connection to the infamous Vorman sisters via their lore sheet, or run one of their clubs, or perhaps you wish to be a descendant of another Malkavian for Stanacenia, one of the first Malkavian anti-tribu. Just because she was part of the Sword of Cain doesn't mean that you are, not even a little bit. There are also 3 other Malkavian exclusive lore sheets that you may wish to consider. Starfall Ranch from Children of the Blood, Malkavian Family from Chicago Folios, and of course, the Cobweb, otherwise known as the Madness Network, the lore sheet in question coming from Chicago by Night. A Malkavian player wanting a sense of found family in their game may want to pull a heretical turn on things via the many cult-related lore sheets from the Onyx Path Publishing sourcebooks. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers, and mechanics that work with and against them. These are just my takes, however, and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make that concept just a little bit spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Influence, entrap, sway, deal, cultivate. These 5 words of power are used to describe the followers of Set, otherwise known as the Ministry. Or do they actually? I am your Lord and Saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. The Ministry are a clan of vampires that dates their existence back to the times of the ancient Egyptians, going so far as to state that Set is not only their founding vampire, but is the progenitor of all vampires. The story of Set, born in Egypt nearly 7,000 years ago, who was a great hunter and warrior, and whose only rival was his elder brother, Osiris. Ra, his grandfather, ordered the death of Set's parents, and his voice in the matter subjected him to banishment. Osiris, on the other hand, became the heir to the throne after the death of Ra. Set took the name Sutekh and travelled north to Arisia, where he encountered his sire and became enamored of reptiles. Set was a brother of Malkav and Saulot, according to the Malkavians. Set was banished from the second city by Malkav for eating the heart of his twin sister, Arakel, according to the Ventrue at least. Set struck down King Osiris and his son Horus, taking Egypt as his own, but Horus came back from the death as a mummy and sought vengeance to his father's destruction, ejecting Set from the throne of Egypt. What would spiral then are 3 tales we do not have the time for today, but each one depicts Set as some form of martyr to his vampiric followers who, in their own ways, would deceive and manipulate those around them for their own gain. With the increased forces of the Second Inquisition, they tried to gain sanctuary to the Camarilla, but the Ivory Tower responded by blowing up the elders who went to speak with them in Paris. The Ministry, in turn, took themselves to the Anarch movement. Most vampire fans who know anything about the Ministry have been playing since the clan's inception and will just wish to recreate the followers of Set of old, which is a totally valid approach. Cult of the Blood Gods and the Church of Set's lore sheet from the Anarch book have what you need to live out your Setite fantasy, so all you need to do is make a Setite of African descent, as they are the ones that still adhere to this title, that is, if you're wishing to stick to the 5th edition transcript religiously to pardon the pun. However, whilst I have just presented the basics of the lore and origins and founder to you, it still presents the question of how to play a spokesperson for a cult, or in more religious terms, a person authorized to conduct religious worship, a member of the clergy, a pastor, a minister. This begins to answer a very complicated and nuanced question, a can of worms that is open for much debate on how it should be answered and addressed, much like the teaching of any religious practice. Followers of any faith and cult act upon and educate the unenlightened of their god's teachings. They are, in a sense, an avatar of their god, a conduit of their will. They are a product of their god. Shards of them exist within the adherent, forming a person around it. With this in mind, it means that the Setites are Set, their bodies, minds, and souls, temples to their manipulative god of chaos. They are a collective ministry, spreading their faith through all of their kind. Each minister should aim to have more take on their pursuit of enlightenment and more resources for their self-fulfilling temple. A teacher or mentor can show them the way, but it is down to the pupil to walk the path and find their own way. Their way. So the next question you're probably wanting me to answer is who is Set to the Setite, which is something I cannot answer because there is no complete answer to that. This can be applied to any other religious entity. No two religions pray and worship their gods the same way. No two people with the same religion pray the same way. Even religions that share gods or concepts are not truly the same, so to assume one of the ministry have this narrow conception and thus indoctrinate members the same way is a foolish misconception. Indeed, it is best to think what does Set represent. For example, if I was to ask you what the Christian God represents or what he symbolizes, you probably think of divinity, peace, good, and other things to that effect. Some may disagree, whilst others may wish to expand upon those philosophies. Set, from the story I shared with you at the beginning, he is the shape-shifting trickster god Loki. Set is the rebellious Lucifer wanting to liberate mankind from the tyranny of God. Set is God's darker reflection, the hostile and destructive Satan. To go against orders to become anti-establishment, freeing the mind from the shackles of normality and embrace the new world, or what those from the outside perspective would call chaos. The minister's role, from the perspective of the Setite, is not of corruption, but of liberation, and most people are already partway there. Every criminal, con artist, atheist, fraudster, and anyone within any existing religion who dares to ask why they are all unknowing servants of Set. He has been in our lives since establishing the word crime. He takes donations in drug deals, accepts sacrifices in the form of trafficking sex rings, and smiles at the blood that trickles into the streets of the alleyway. He is all these things and more. All that is needed is to get them to wake up from the dreams of falsehood, often long before the embrace. To that end, Set is Cain, the first vampire, who defied and murdered for his kin for his own envious claims. To exist as a vampire is a reminder of your place in the world, that you are not meant to exist. The curse of Cain was meant for him and him alone, and Cain defied God not once, not twice, but 3 times. You are a debaucherous sin incarnate in any other eye not belonging to a minister. To feel the blood of Set course your veins, to be a creature of chaos, and to defy the ultimate creator is the greatest calling one could receive. He is not God, Set is your God, and you are his angels on earth. The Lasombra use mortal churches as a means to assert power in the mortal and kindred world, but they are not a faithful clan. The ministry are the clan of faith. The Lasombra have trapped themselves in a rigid society that does not truly want them, whilst the ministry are free within the disorganized anarchs to influence them to their eternal bidding. It is easier to influence those whose modus operandi is to stick it to the man. However, that is not to say that Camarilla Setites do not exist. After all, the Camarilla is arguably the best thing Canaanite society has put together, which would also mean that it is a bloody fine vehicle to fuel one's agenda, which is why the ministry went to them first, and the anarchs became a sloppy second best. Setites of the Tower are not seen as traitors either, as the true glory of Set will be made manifest in the subversion or destruction of all the other clans in the end. It should be obvious that the most important of the 3 minister disciplines is presence. A good Setite should use it to sway emotions with subtlety, but with great prowess. Your congregation needs to love you as a speaker of your God, or the wicked right hand, but it also needs to know their place when they have stepped out of line. In many ways, the love to be in the spotlight, but it serves a grander, holier purpose. They are not the Toreador wanting to be the attraction or the Ventrue wanting to be obeyed. The presence of the Ministry is again an extension of Set, who was banished from the light, much like Cain was. The most obvious manifestation of this is through the clan weakness of the abhorrent of the light, but it also extends to the use of obfuscate to keep them in the dark. It is also used to assume different guises to appear more trustworthy, such as your bestie or lover who just learnt of this new esoteric New Age religion that has turned their world upside down. The most unique of their disciplines, however, is Serpentis, or at least it was, before it was smashed into the form of Protean because somebody decided they were ultimately the same discipline. Whereas the Gangrel take on the form of birds and wolves, the Setite assumes snakes. Rather than claws, the followers of Set get large, scaly talons. Yes, these can be used to attack and defend, like an animal, but the Ministry use their gifts to inspire awe as well as fear. It is easy to apply the attitude of "look what you obtain should you join us" mentality, a blessing from unholy gods to lure the weakest of minds and those the most loyal of followers. There are also other unique gifts the Ministry have that make their form of shapeshifting stand out from their Gangrel and now Tzimisce, which you can explore at your leisure in Cults of the Blood Gods. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways you can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. Obviously, we're going to focus mainly on either Osiris or Sin Queen. Both could apply to cults, but one implies a large size and you are the one calling the shots, whereas the other implies you're not the one in charge and is much smaller. Siren would be appropriate fit too, depending on the table you're all at, as many sexual acts, including sex itself, are taboo subjects that are liberating to those who enjoy it and explores its different avenues. A more street-level minister may focus on the extortionist predator type from Cult of the Blood Gods, as they deal in blood and blood money. There are many Loresheets you can also assign to your character, but here are some of the ones I think fit well with tonight's clan. Again, we are going to consider the various cult-related ones from Cult of the Blood Gods, Trails of Ash and Bone, Children of the Blood, and Forbidden Religions. Remember that Set comes in many forms, so you can express and spread deception and pandemonium in many different ways, unless that involves trying to worship Mithras. The Setites have never really been liked by the Bull God, but it wouldn't be very Ministry to worship a different god entirely, one that you could never hope of morphing into your own line of thinking. Your manipulative gods are going to get you all bustled up to various people, and any particular kindred scattered in source books may be worthwhile getting in your good books, or bad, depending on the concept in question. Despite their cause, the Ministry as a whole are seen as a low clan in most parts of the world, with only being a high clan in Egypt for obvious reasons. So if you want either of those, you have the core book for those as well. Gangsters amongst the Ministry may be interested in the Capone gang lore sheet from Chicago by Night. There were once Setite warriors, or warrior Setites, enemies of a particular tribe of Lupine, and you could take the fight to them, serving a set sword with a Lupine expert and a newbie lore sheets. Your influence may take to the internet via the kindred social media influencer lore sheet from Let the Streets Run Red, forming an online cult of tech bros or crazed fans. And of course, the Church of Set from the Anarch book is there for you as well, in addition to Hashar Rudazi, if you really want to embrace the Setite doctrine, along with the other Theopadians. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers and mechanics that work with and against them. But these are just my takes, and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make that concept just a little bit spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Spy, hide, investigate, lurk, observe. These 5 words of power are used to describe the sewer rats, otherwise known as the Nosferatu, or do they actually? I'm your Lord and Saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. The Nosferatu, regardless of their walk of life or the reason for their embrace, are varying levels of deformed, meaning they are varying levels of monstrous to look at. Some resemble Count Orlok, whilst others look even worse. Some, however, just look a little odd enough to make those in the know question what they just gazed upon. Such physical makeovers, for lack of a better description, can be traced back to the clan's demigod of a founder, the hateful antediluvian Absimiliard, whose singular goal is to exterminate his descendants. He was embraced by Zilla, whose reasoning varied but all stemmed from the vanity of the once beautiful hunter, frustrated by a wound cast upon his face post-hunt. Through spite, Zilla embraced the Nosferatu, or Nosferatu himself depending on who you ask, locking the wound into place. Absimiliard would not be too happy with this, being one of the main catalysts for the revolt against the second generation. Cain would punish Absimiliard, bringing the beast within to the surface, turning the third generation vampire into a physical monster. This would reverberate across his descendants, and since that time, Absimiliard has hunted his descendants, using blood-bound agents, the Niktuku, to hunt down the rest of the line. It is no secret that I adore the Nosferatu, the reasons for which are twofold. Partly because I'm a filthy monster fucker with a search history that would make the most deviant set-eyed blush, but that is a conversation we're not having tonight. The reason why I love the Nosferatu as a clan to roleplay is that they're actually one of the best clans for new players, but also for more experienced players who want a challenge. The monstrosities, as the World of Darkness HQ has started calling them, which definitely isn't ableist, are walking masquerade breaches, yes, which makes them an excellent starting point for the Nosferatu you wish to make. Is your character like most who wish to hide in plain sight and minimize encounters with the sheriff and hunters? If so, how? Do you cling to the shadows like it's your favorite blankie, or do you assume the guise of some random schmuck on the street? Or do you just wrap yourself up in lots of clothing and hope for the best? Or do you not give a fuck at all? Either way, thinking like this naturally gives you a better appreciation of upholding the masquerade with careful use of disciplines, or without. To that end, players who start off with the Nosferatu are also the first to learn that the disciplines have limits, as obfuscate is not total invisibility and animalism is not as straightforward as it appears to be, and potence is remarkably broken across all editions of Vampire the Masquerade, so you can only be destined for greatness when playing a Nosferatu, but more on those powers later. Let's return to the clan themselves. The questions I have just asked you have already unlocked many options for you, Absimiliard, and much of the clan who would be his descendants are not too happy with how they look, and many of them will never truly get accustomed to it. Vanity is the most common cause of vices found within the clan. Everyone around them is a reminder that they look wrong and do not belong. Monsters, freaks, and all the other things that anyone with any disability or deformity, major, minor, physical, or mental, will tell you. You can wear the mask and pretend to be confident in what you are, but there will be times when it will falter, and that one tear will trickle down the face of the broken soul. It is as rare as it is difficult for a Nosferatu to uphold mortal contacts in the traditional sense. They can attract pity from outcasts and rejects, and acquire servants and loyal followers who would know their face, but few others would, so contact with mortals should really be as sparse as possible. Save for only the Malkavians, the Nosferatu have always been at the bottom of the pile, never tasting the high clan sippy cup. This is especially true since the departure of the Brujah and Gangrel finally committed to the jump to the Anarchs. Some Nosferatu joined them, assuming the nickname Red Nosferatu. Red is the colour of blood, the shade of anarchy and liberation. It is associated with anger, and Red Nosferatu are tired of such ableist treatment, not willing to hide and act like they're weaker the kind, more willing to bare their chest and do what needs to be done to push back the Camarilla, even if it means making yourself a little more visible. Of course, the Anarchs don't offer that much variety from the Camarilla in terms of attitudes towards them. It also doesn't stop the fact that, at the end of the day, the only ones who understand the Nosferatu are other Nosferatu, which is why you will find most Nosferatu being fairly comfortable and open with members of the clan in opposing sects. Their abilities make the Nosferatu excellent spies and information brokers, whether they actually seek them out on foot, fall under the stereotypical hacker, or just the shoulder to cry on cause no one else will listen. Those who are inclined can make for pretty monstrous assassins too. Information and secrets are far more valuable to Kindred than liquid assets, which is why they are so needed within the Camarilla, something you won't hear any officials say too loudly. The Camarilla offers them most security, which is why most chose to stay. From this point, we reach a crossroads in this lonely existence. You can keep walking straight and just, to the best of your ability, exist and be indifferent about your predicament. The other two paths lean into the monster and to the person you once were. Starting with the latter. 5th edition, via the writers at Onyx Path Publishing, the Cleopatra has been reintroduced. This term is used by the Nosferatu to refer to their clan members who were turned into vampires due to their exceptional beauty, although some Nosferatu use this term as a form of punishment for those who are both beautiful and cruel. Not all Cleopatras are vain. Even those with kind personalities may become targets of the Nosferatu who harbour an intense hatred for beauty. Those that are vain may try and emulate their former lives or embrace new mortal ones, wearing fancy clothes, doing makeup, doing their hair, or what remains of it. All those fun, glamorous things with the finesse of a drunk hippo. It should be noted that Nosferatu who can pull this off particularly well are the ones with more influence in court or with devoted mortal followers that give them resources. Those who are more desperate to find a means to undo their curse have tried to join the cult of Yima or seek out the Nephilim cult. If your Nosferatu is clinging onto the old ways, try and think why they are like this and what lengths they would go to prove that they are as normal or regular as any other vampire. What fuels them? Sadness or spite? How do they exert their influence? Emulating the local Toreador or form or join a cult? A variant of this cult idea can be found in most V5 cults as well, to create a sense of family or individuality, where you can forget for a time that you are a Nosferatu at all. Now, this path also has a path where you hate what you are and hate others of your ilk, becoming one of the Withered Ones cult, embracing the Nictuku legends, assuming that is indeed what you believe and don't need additional validation to kill off others of your ilk. There's also a thing within the cult where they steal Nosferatu as well, so keep that in mind as well. Then there are those who choose to embrace the monster they appear to be and be the boogeymen of everyone's nightmares. This is the main other path some Nosferatu tend to walk down, or one that is immediately quite difficult to do as freely as one would like, not just because of the threat of the Masquerade breaching result in death by sheriff, hound or hunter, but because 5th edition doesn't allow the benefits one may hope of playing a vampire who is not as humane as everyone else is trying to emulate. This is on a mechanical level, however, as there is plenty one can do to roleplay this, revealing clothing or lack of clothing at all, displaying your true self to the world, talking to animals a lot, as a beast might, and being more violent and open with your tactics. There is also little need for obfuscate when potence can just aid in removing witnesses. This can also be amplified with the forming or joining of a cult, where the vampiric existence is at the very forefront of its agenda, or displaying to the world that the Nosferatu are the vampires in their intended form. So you can hopefully see that with these examples and descriptions in mind, there is lots of potential for Nosferatu players to roleplay some truly unique ideas, rarely sticking to one core theme and stereotype. The same can be said with the usage of their 3 disciplines: animalism, obfuscate, and potence. Animals make the best sort of spies as well as small, irritating torture devices, but so can potence, breaking limbs in quick succession or reminding everyone that just because the Nosferatu keep to the shadows doesn't mean that they are pushovers. Obfuscate, despite belonging to other clans, is really their signature tune. Whether it's to hide in plain sight or use Mask of a Thousand Faces to look like someone they're not, there are plenty of uses the Nosferatu make with Obfuscate. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways you can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but it is difficult to pinpoint specific examples because of how broad one can be with it. Many Nosferatu would naturally fit the alley cat predator type, as they are beggars and they don't have luxury to choose. Those with more influence and a means to exalt their victims may feed by means of the extortionist predator type. Those who want to minimize contact with humans might want to feed on sleeping parties with Cleopatras may try and be consensualists or cleavers, or maybe even a farmer or blood leech if feeding on people is wrong for them, or even bagger or grave robber if hunting is just too much for their sensitive souls. Though, if they are really fucking confident or know that they can get away feeding on monster fuckers like me, Siren would be an interesting fit. Cult members or leaders would naturally gear towards Osiris and Scene Queen. More monstrous or unpleasant Nosferatu would adopt Pursuer or Trapdoor as their methods of feeding, becoming real slashers in the process. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here are some of the ones I think fit well with tonight's clan. The Nosferatu gotta get that dank lore and knowledge, so if they can hook up with any specific kindred mentioned in any lore sheet, any of them is a good bet, especially if they are an Nosferatu. Some of these kindred-specific lore sheets put you right in the action with specific titles or focus on combat, which are worth seeking out, in addition to any lore sheets that has you take up arms. Any lore sheet that touches upon specific events or groups such as the Trinity, the Society of Leopold, First Light, Lupine Expert, Kindred Iconography, the Week of Nightmares, the Promise of 1528 and so forth may be worth checking into as well. There are some Nosferatu-only lore sheets which are, as of the time of writing this script, London Under London from Fall of London, Niktuku from the Winter's Teeth comic, Descendants of Zelios from the core book, and Cleopatra from the Children of the Blood source book from Onyx Path Publishing. Kindred social media influencer might be worth considering too if your Kindred Cleopatra is not interested in the Cleopatra lore sheet but can't tear away from the site formerly known as Twitter or TikTok. If your Nosferatu is an ugly, disease-ridden fiend, blood-plagued or plagues of Gehenna might add some lovely gross bits to your Nosferatu. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers, and mechanics that work with and against them. These are just my takes, and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make that concept just a little bit spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Elude, trick, bluff, deceive, wander. These 5 words of power are used to describe the nomads, Clan Ravnos, or do they actually? I'm your Lord and Saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. The Ravnos are descendants of the dreadfully powerful Ravnos Antediluvian, a horrific monster known by many names, but we will call him Zappathazora. The origins of the clan is an unknown mystery, both in filth and older editions of Vampire, but one of these stories has Zappathazora as a thief who was embraced by Erad to be used as a tool against the other third-generation vampires. Others speak of an encounter with Cain and the Wild Ones, the werewolves, whilst others speak of a heated duel, war or relationship with the Gangrel Antediluvian Honoria. Whilst the origins are up for speculation, what isn't is the demigod's demise, an event known as the Week of Nightmares, where the Antediluvian would arise from torpor, resulting in many, if not all, the Ravnos elders to go mad and destroy each other. Whilst 5th edition does not explain how this happened, other than demoting the efforts to, and I quote, unknown parties, most fans who have read the older legacy texts will tell you it is the combined effort of mages and the Quajin, the kindred of the East, using nuclear energy from the sun to blow the Antediluvian up in the middle of a desert during the day. Pretty metal stuff, honestly. All that remains, if you and the ST allow it, is a vial of his blood, but we will touch upon that later. The Ravnos are a clan that has always had somewhat of a jaded reputation due to the writer's persistence to force the clan into Roma cultures badly. In fairness, they tried to fix this by saying that these Ravno were not the best of the clan. The true bunch were the Ventrue-like rulers of India, but it was a little too late. It is entirely possible to someone to stick to those older Ravnos themes with some better research, but that will not be our focus tonight, as 5th edition stripped all that away. No culture is allowed in World of Darkness HQ because the cis-white male Europeans that call the shots say that culture in fiction is bad. This is humorously ironic given their 5 adjectives and their core theme of travelling are poor stereotypes associated with the Roma. But I digress. The rogues are nomads, always have been. With a group, family, or by oneself, they are known to travel, and those who choose to do so with other people care about those around them, usually deeply, like family. Family is not always defined by blood, but it is always defined by raw emotions, mainly love and passion. Similar comments could be said about their need for travel, not to be chained down to one place, explore the world, or just be scared of being caught. Their supernatural wanderlust is not described in 5th edition, leaving the reader to make up their own assumptions or understand that the developers of the 5th edition book are paying lip service to older material, but it is clear that the blood of Cain manifests itself in peculiar ways, and we know that one group of vampires reacts very differently to their own passions. To give the Ravnos more depth, try and think about what keeps them going. Is it for artistic pursuits to expand your mind's eye, or illegal contract work helping you to get on by? What are your crafts? Do you travel and protect your family, or protect the family or bloodhands left behind? Do you wish to help others or con them? Whatever the cause and grander purpose, if such a meaning exists, it is a solitary path you lead, and it will always be dangerous. A street performer will need to push themselves to stop their act from becoming stale. A gun for hire is only going to be called upon to take out a bigger and worse target. Protecting your mortal loved ones will push you to the extreme to guarantee their safety. Heightened emotions, positive and negative, make one reckless and, depending on the circumstance, cocky. This is the compulsion, the more subtle of the Ravnos' plight in the modern night. The fire that burns when left stationary could be interpreted very differently. As described in the companion guide, makes them doomed, the fiery rage of Sapphifosora burning within. This could be a weird knock-on effect of having a demigod being destroyed 3 ways till sundown, or a primordial fear his spirit remains, cursing and punishing the clan for their existence. Why this may be the case is down to you, as I am truly pulling at straws at this laughably easy bane to avoid. The variety their roles can bring are numerous, serving as one of 3 independent clans in V5, the largest being the clans and bloodlines that make up the Hecata, and the smallest being the Salubri bloodline. They are hardly large themselves, the Ravnos I mean, so the existence of the Ravnos is, for lack of a better word, special. That isn't to say that you are some chosen one for your chronicle, but the existence of some Ravnos in the city will create some interesting spice. The illusions and thievery the Ravnos are still known for would naturally make them an untrustworthy clan. You can use older books to work out what each clan thinks of the Ravnos, but stereotypes can only go so far. Give some thought about you specifically, what your sire saw in you, and how that is viewed amongst everyone else. The easiest of the alignable sects for a V5 Ravnos player in my opinion are the Anarchs, as they are the ones that are the most nomadic of the playable sects and factions, that is without including problematic homebrew and problematic authors. The Ravnos being an independent clan and having suffered greatly in terms of membership, I'm not particularly interested in getting involved with the Anarchs or reforming the Camarilla. Some Ravnos who have joined the Anarchs cause in order to bring about change in the modern world. Others have joined for more selfish reasons, seeking to take advantage of the chaos before the end times. Those within the movement take on the role of scouts, spies, and more recently, evangelists, using their illusionary powers to take advantage of the growing roles of faith in kindred society. The individual survival and protection are paramount to the Anarch Ravnos. Those that support the Camarilla, however, mostly pay lip service at best. Just because they are members of the Tower does not mean they suddenly become well-behaved or likable. They try to curb their unconventional ways to avoid being targeted by their new peers. However, the Camarilla counterparts remain suspicious of their motives, and only a handful of princes have Ravnos accomplices who work for them to steal and gather information from their enemies. Some vampires turn a blind eye to their diablerie, as long as it doesn't involve their own kind. It's safe to say that Ravnos who have joined the Camarilla are not trusted by any of the new clanmates, and those who speak out against them risk losing something valuable. The daredevil aspect of the Ravnos namesake is based solely on their new discipline of presence to make them center stage, or make themselves that bit more alluring when things get tough in a social setting. A clan of thieves and people who are better off alone wouldn't suit this power all that well, but some understanding of it is required to make use of chemistry, an amalgam of obfuscate in 5th edition. Presence of the mind, so to speak, allows one to inflict horrible visions of grandeur or total nonsensical means. Regarding obfuscate proper, it is the great tool to remain hidden from most eyes. Animalism allows one to extend your eyes to a bunch of different furry servitors, as well as something to nibble on should things get a little tough. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways you can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. If you want to focus on the nomadic family life in or out of cultural ones, such as the Roma, it might be worth cashing in on the roadside killer predator type from Let the Streets Run Red. A slightly easier version of this comes in the form of the cleaver predator type, which can be found in the core book. You may also use your clientele in your performing acts as payment, so how about trying the Scene Queen predator type, which is also from the core book. For 2 more core book predator types, choosing to focus on animals or other scarce means would have your character focus more towards bagger or farmer respectively. For a lore-focused twist, the elder Ravnos that committed diablerie en masse upon their kin through the Week of Nightmares may have affected you. Perhaps you ate vampires aplenty. An old Antler Ravnos may have the blood leech predator type, the last predator type from the core book I will be mentioning tonight, but exercise this one with caution. I don't want any dumb claims from any STs that I have ruined your games with game-breaking Ravnos. It, however, is not the last predator type I will mention. Guns for hire or contract killers may gain some benefit from the extortionist predator type from Cults of the Blood Gods. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here are some of the ones I think fit well with tonight's clan. It would be pretty difficult for the Ravnos to be aligned with any existing character, particularly if they're one of the Gangrel, but stereotypes could be broken quite easily. That, and your association with a character doesn't have to be on good terms. Perhaps you have pissed them off somehow. The Ravnos have always been a low clan, which wouldn't bother the vast majority of Ravnos, but if it bothers you, the player, enough to include it in your game, slap it on that character sheet. Older Ravnos characters may benefit from the Week of Nightmares lore sheet if they want to use the minimal Ravnos lore found in 5th edition. The Ravnos also had a part to play in the Anarch Revolt, just by existing, which your character may know about via the Anarch Revolt lore sheet. You may be a gun for hire for the Capone gang in Chicago by night, know a thing or two about the Goblin Roads or part of the Pony Express, both found within Chicago folios. On the driving, moving theme, you may want to pick up the Road Courier lore sheet, which you can find on the World of Darkness website. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers, and mechanics that work with and against them. These are just my takes and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make the concept just a little bit spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Heal, hide, resist, survive, redeem. These 5 words of power are used to describe the fugitives, Clan Salubri, or do they actually? I'm your Lore and Saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. The Salubri, as depicted in the 5th edition of Vampire the Masquerade, are an enigmatic bloodline whose purpose in the setting is just as vague as it is annoying. Anyone who has heard of the Salubri is aware of their unique quirk, the third eye that bursts onto their forehead post-embrace. This can be traced back to their founder, the antediluvian Saulot or Saulot, if your Cyclops is of Asian descent. The most common of the theories is that he was the first kindred to attain Golconda, the additional knowledge result allowing him to see things no one had seen before, the knowledge attained by his enlightenment manifesting itself physically. Whether he achieved this by himself or from a certain group of controversial vampires vetoed out of existence with or without their consent, both he and his clan to be would be known as healers and warriors, supposedly in the pursuit of Golconda as well. The other thing that most of you would be aware of is that the clan is no longer fully fledged, but a bloodline on the verge of extinction. The Tremere, as part of their medieval crusade to achieve dominance in the vampirical arcane, devoured the antediluvian and instigated the genocide of the supposed soul-eating Salubri throughout the centuries, resulting in the bloodline that barely exists tonight. Just through the brief description of Saulot and the history of the bloodline, there is a lot to unpack. The most striking about this is the theme of tragedy. Beyond the usual woes that come with being embraced as one of the eternal damned, you sprout a third eye that might as well be a bullseye to anyone and everyone that you are not quite right, regardless of the knowledge of the supernatural. People will ask questions, take pictures, and prod the weird person on the street like some exotic animal at the zoo. To the vampires in the know, you are a victim of their laws and their judgment that should be wiped out for being soul thieves, diablerists, or whatever the Tremere of that particular domain insist. To the vampires who don't know, you are to be treated with suspicion because why the fuck do you have a third eye on your head and why does it bleed with any discipline usage? You are a walking masquerade violation waiting to happen, which is far from the days of the clans adorning the high clan status despite their oddity. We have talked before in this series just how the worst human traits mutate with the vampiric condition, and neither vampire nor human likes any sense of individuality, or rather, anyone who sticks out from the established fashionable crowd. You have to be a pretty resilient individual to carry on the night as one of Saulot's progeny. This can be reflected in those the Salubri embrace, such as doctors, activists, as well as those who are terminally ill or suicide, where the embrace gives them a second chance or, more sadly, someone who cares enough to listen and look after them for a short while, coddling you in the process. When the world and then some are on your back, it makes sense for sire and child to stick together, at least in the sense the character can take the sire as a Mwala. There are not enough Salubri to claim domain like a Brujah or Ventrue might. Therefore, to roleplay as Salubri in V5, one should embrace this unique loneliness. I should note that despite sounding similar, loneliness and aloneness are not synonyms. To feel loneliness is isolation and a feeling that no one cares. The different clans, for the most part, are content with the security that their ilk brings and the relationships they have with some of their vampiric cousins, and, at the end of the night, despite it all, the vampire sect will protect and fight for them. The Salubri do not have this, especially if you follow the notion that only 7 of them exist in one go. The Salubri are one of the 3 independent Cainites in the setting, as of the writing and recording of this episode, so it is in their interest to align themselves with what sect rules the given setting just out of necessity. Their numbers are sparse, and chances are you are the only Salubri in your city, so, for lack of a better phrase, the presence of your Salubri is special. What does your character plan to achieve? What do you wish to explore? Do you aim to find Golconda, or do you strike against it? Older editions of Vampire divided the Salubri into 3 castes. The Healer caste, which is the caste that V5 focuses on the most. Maybe you do not like the idea that there are supposedly 7 Salubri, or maybe you want to explore why this is the case. Chat with your ST and see what you can come up with. Is it the truth, or is there some sort of rumour spread by the Salubri? Perhaps the 7 are 7 elders that are overseeing or orchestrating something good, bad, or esoteric. While such a plot could undermine the ideas we have just been presenting, it could provide some catharsis to your caring Salubri. To that end, what poor soul is blessed or cursed with your healing touch? The terminally ill, orphaned children, traumatized thin bloods? Fans of VTM who have read more than the V5 books would know there is a lot more than 7 Salubri, but you would also know that most of them are not healers. The warrior caste are protectors and fighters, which could make for an interesting concept for a V5 Salubri, whether they are on the front lines of any battle or some sort of free-eyed hitman, using your powers against your foes as limiting as they are as an offensive means in 5th edition. If you do treat your Salubri as one of the warriors, they traditionally were with the Sabbat, but it is easy to twist them to fit the Anarchs. Does your Salubri exhibit more monstrous traits? The tragedy they exhibit is not so human. Perhaps they revel in their horrible bane, as opposed to their helpful compulsion. There is also the more obscure Watcher caste, the Wuzhou, who are scholars and explorers, who could either mean thief, investigator, spy, or odd bookkeeper. Secrets are worth more than gold in Kindred Society, and if you can prove yourself useful by digging up some truly dank secrets, then the superiors would consider keeping you around. There are 2 blood-based tools that the Salubri have to discover said secrets, and that would be Auspex and Dominate. Auspex grants the supernatural means to unearth wisdom, not of this realm, but to look into the past and future, which helps them prepare for an attack about to strike or may come. Dominate can force the truth out of people, whether their own malicious means or to strain buried traumas from shocked individuals, kindred and mortal alike. It is also used to make people forget about the whole bleeding eye thing, despite said mind wiping is accompanied by the forehead bleeding, reinforcing just how stupid this fucking bane is. But I digress. The last of their disciplines is Fortitude, which I don't think needs explaining. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways you can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. Keeping with the overall caring theme, Consensualist is the most likely, probably stereotypical, of the predator types of your character to have, in addition to Grim Reaper. Varma is another debatably humane choice if feeding upon humans is too much for the weak heart, or Bloodleech if even that is too much, or you wish to be part of the reason why the Salubri are considered soul thieves. Alleycat could be easy for Salubri who just don't give a fuck. Trapdoor can provide a means for the Salubri to feed without going out about risking being caught. This could also be done under the guise of a therapist taking payment in blood, a strange tarot reader with a very authentic looking all-seeing third eye, or just some monstrous freak getting a buzz out of it all. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here's some of the ones I think fit well with tonight's clan, or should I say bloodline. With what has been discussed tonight and sticking with said theme solely, any character-focused lore sheet may benefit from having a Salubri plaything. Some may have a special interest in you just because your existence may bring about the SI, but keeps you around for reasons you can discuss with your ST. A lonely Salubri may find family, not with their coterie, but with any of the cults in D5, whose members may not care for clan loyalty, but for loyalty only for the cult and their deity or being in question. Both Blood-Plagued and the Circulatory system from the core book and Anarch respectively, both other with different/easier ways to obtain blood, whilst also getting yourself out there in various forms of danger. You may wish to take the high clan lore sheet or low clan depending on your ST's decision for the outlook of the Salubri, both of which can be found in the core book. Combat-focused Salubri warriors may take an interest in kindred dueling from Chicago Folios and Lupine Expert from Chicago by Night if you're feeling particularly daring. The latest lore sheet, as of the writing of this script, is the Machinations of Saulot, which is the first and only lore sheet to be made available for Salubri characters, which may be in your interest. It is available as part of the Book of Nord Apocrypha from Renegade. If you don't want all those pieces and just the lore sheet, I will leave a link in the description for you for a copy of the lore sheet I obtained. And of course, and certainly not least, there is the Golconda lore sheet from the core book. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers and mechanics that work with and against them. These are just my takes and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan/bloodline? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make the concept just a little spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Mercurians, runoffs, chameleons, abortions, the young ones. These 5 nicknames are used to describe the Finbloods, or do they actually? I am your Lord and Saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. The Finnbloods, or Duskborn, if we adopt their Anarch title for just a moment, are just as many fiends as they are not. They exist as vampires, but are harmed as easily as the mortals they once were. They are not half mortal, but not full vampires either. They are young, but not weak, fragile, yet strong. They exist in the world of darkness, but they certainly do not belong. As the name would imply, the Finn-blooded are kindred whose vitae lacks the supernatural potency to benefit from the perks of the Curse of Cain, but also be free from the banes and compulsions that hold each vampiric clan back within the world of darkness. They are vampires who are 14, 15, or 16 times removed from Cain, which is to say they are generations 14 to 16. By most kindred customs, they should not exist, but yet they do. Their persistent presence are signs of the end times, though many of their own ilk do not know what they are. Those that do know either want to weigh into the club proper or see themselves as a new beginning and change in vampiric society. Unfortunately, Cainites are not known for embracing change. On the topic of embrace, to create a Finnblood requires a level of risk not found with the other clans. Anyone can request permission from a prince or baron to create a child, but that is assuming that you are of good standing, the child in question can bring good things for the affiliated sect, and the side to be is not of the 13th generation. Everyone knows the vitae is too weak for it to go smoothly, i.e. not kill the child to be. That, and no one wants to be associated with someone who brought a Finnblood into the world, so embracing someone through the official means is off the table. So to create a Finnblood is to put a target on the sire's head, but if they want to embrace, they're going to do it anyway. Perhaps you are a lover to your sire who wants to spend forever and ever with them, or that friend who knew just a bit too much, pushing your maker into a corner, or you just begged to be with them. In these examples, the emotions are much stronger, perhaps more human than what you would find in other embraces. The younger generations of vampires tend to be closer to the memories of their humanity, so the need for companionship and love that most humans would understand would still be there. That, and both are generally able to get it on with the least amount of difficulty. It is understandable, however, that many, if not most Finnbloods would avoid their maker like the plague, knowing either very little or next to nothing. You could even be that poor soul that had too much blood taken from them. Perhaps you, the player, have no idea who made them, and this sort of backstory, or the lack of thereof, could be explained in-game, with the sire making a dramatic appearance at a dramatically inappropriate moment. As much as the Finnbloods are treated as their own clan in V5, they are not a clan, but much a larger faction, which we'll get onto in a moment, but a regular Cainite, usually pertaining to a clan. Many Finnbloods are Caitiff, technically speaking, but either the player, or ST, or both should give a bit of thought about the sire's clan. Whilst it may not determine any banes, compulsions, providing you don't select the corresponding Finnblood flaws, you should consider what elements of your sire's clan seeps over. A Brujah Finnblood may have a little composure and is a bit punchy, whereas a Finnblood embraced by one of the ministry may be sensitive to the light or just exceptionally good at lying. Lasombra and Ventrue Finnbloods may be more assertive than others, whilst a Finnblood with Gangrel blood may just like to be left alone or have an affinity with animals. These are just examples, but little tidbits like this can give some direction to your character's behaviour and how they choose to interact with the world. It also provided with some opportunities for other members of the coterie to play the fun game of guessing what clan are you. We all do it, but the shock of learning they are one of the Duskborn can create all sorts of spice. Do they, the coterie, hinder your existence, or will they aid it? The writing in V5 implies the Finnbloods are more welcome in the Anarchs than the Camarilla that brands them with Tremere magic and ash, but this is often deceptive. No one likes the Finnbloods for being too weak when compared to their full-blooded cousins, or an omen of Gehenna. It is implied that, at character creation, you do not know much about the world around you and are younger than the average Generation 13 fledgling, but this does not have to be the case. Many Finnbloods use their own alchemy, which in some instances is far more potent than blood sorcery of the Banu Haqim and Tremere, with far less secretive prestige of those clans as well. Think Breaking Bad levels of culture rather than fine robes and cauldrons that boil with trouble. There is a stronger sense of community in this regard, pushing their condition forward, developing their own discipline, the one singular dot of it, if we get meta for just a second. However, they have no particular organisation to call their own, much to the chagrin of those who follow the path of the Sun for the Sabbat and the Ashfinders cult. However, the Finnbloods are not without their ways of finding like-minded individuals. They do not have the shared ancestral resources that keep such groups safe, nor the political capital to integrate them within larger kindred society. Instead, Finnbloods tend to assemble themselves within each city with the degree of organisation and the number of groups dependent on the local conditions. It is probably a common sight to find at least one Finnblood Soviet or gang of self-radicalised anarchs, possibly even one recognised by the real anarch community in town. However, these groups are often isolated both politically and geographically, with little influence over the larger kindred society. In a big city with a lot of Finnbloods but a powerful Camarilla presence, one could expect to find lots of different small gangs and groups. On the other hand, a smaller city with a power vacuum lets a larger network of Duskborn emerge, only to factionalize itself within a few years. Such is the way of the Finnbloods, a group that struggles to find its place in the complex and unforgiving world of kindred society. The total inverse to all of this is true. You may have spent all your vampiric life in solitude, secluded from the rest of undead society, forced to work with other Finnbloods or regular K-Knights, lest your head is shoved into a spike by a reeve or sheriff. Whether it's low or high action, politics is going to have a very large factor in your game, as your character now has to survive a world where politics and power reign supreme. Your Finnblood will struggle to navigate the complexities of the sect or city. They are not the ones who make the rules, nor can easily break them. Instead, they focus on their nightly deeds and short-term problems, banding together in coteries to survive in a world that doesn't care about them. Now, all this implies that every Finnblood character in every game is going to be in an all-Finnblood chronicle, which is not what I recommend, particularly if you're new to Vampire the Masquerade. It is, however, something I do recommend every V5 player do at least once. A Finnblood Chronicle is a tale of teamwork, uncertainty, and being an outcast. It tells the story of characters who build connections within their coterie and out into their neighbourhoods before engaging the larger world. They hunt and learn to maximise their powers against kindred opposition, battling against the occasional scourge or any other form of slayer. Some players may find the restrictions of other clans just too stifling, preferring the freedom that comes with being a Finnblood. In a Finnblooded Chronicle, they can explore what it means to be a vampire, to experiment with Finnblood alchemy, to confront their death, or their undeath I should say, to come to terms with their beast and even challenge the sun itself. Running a Finnblood Chronicle for STs allows a player to adapt to their world with fewer restrictions while still remaining true to their vampiric nature. Some Duskborn may actually wish to seek a means to become a fully fledged vampire, to cast off their abilities to eat food, procreate and, rarer still, walk in the sun, to become a creature of the night. Think what your character would do to push themselves over the edge, to fully embrace their vampiric nature, to pardon the pun, because whatever it is you have to do, you are going to have to perform diablerie. On the flip side, many Finnbloods may do everything they can to try and find a cure to their vampirism. Only one true method is provided in Anarch, the sourcebook that is, but a few other ideas are given to you as well on page 160. You could base your position of Chronicle around these ideas, or let your ST come up with their own, with no guarantee it should work. It is, after all, a horror game, and the life of a vampire sucks. Unlike previous editions of Vampire the Masquerade, Finnbloods are assumed to not possess any disciplines, and even then, it is only a singular dot of a particular discipline. The blood is part of the vampire, but the way they improve is dependent on the vampire and what they deem to be important, focusing their efforts in a certain direction. A Nosferatu that does not want to be seen by anyone because they are ashamed of what they look like is going to be much better with Obfuscate than a Nosferatu strutting about with their dick out in the wind, proud of being a freak. They may be better with Potence, tapping into their inhuman aspects. Think about the sire of your character and think how they would have experienced their clan discipline, as well as what occurred within the mortal and vampiric life. If they spent time with animals, they suddenly started understanding how they could speak via animalism. If they have auspex, perhaps they claimed to be a psychic or one of those poor kids who knew which members of their household was coming up the stairs based on the sound as they were coming up the stairs. Or say if they were a large content creator with a large following turning their fans against a smaller content creator just on the basis of lies, presence might be a fun one for you. Additionally, your power may be the use of thin blood alchemy, which has many applications and means of distilling, in addition to the various story hooks surrounding certain formulas and NPCs for you to meet and greet. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways you can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. Assuming your ST isn't the sort that follows the exact wording of the book and prohibits predator types for thin-blooded characters, Cleaver and possibly Consensualist are the safest bet for the most fresh and young of thin-bloods, or perhaps Bagger if you have them baby fangs or just don't want to commit to drinking people. Similarly, Farmer is a fairly safe bet, and so is Sandman. Your character may have a misunderstanding of how Diablo works and may become a blood leech. Those that are desperate may naturally slide into Alleycat just out of sheer desperation. More acknowledgeable Thinblood may use their knowledge or unique advantages against their foes with the Extortionist or Pursuer from Cults of the Blood Gods and the Player's Guide respectively. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here are some of the ones I think fit well with tonight's clan list. As well as the last bunch of clans we have looked at, any character-specific lore sheet would love to take full advantage of a Thinblood, and I'm sure you would love to see what you could do to get a leg over the person in question too. Or maybe you wish to run away with them. You decide, or from them, I should say. You may feel safer with any of the cults in the various books, such as the Ashfinders cult from Cults of the Blood Gods. The other Thinblood exclusive lore sheet is Student of Corrine Tonk from Blood Sigils. A Thinblood may misunderstand the concept of Golconda as a means of becoming human again, and you may wish to explore that with the Golconda lore sheet from the core book, or wish to explore their Gehenna ties with the Book of Nod from Chicago by Night sourcebook. Plagues of Gehenna to really stir the pot, which can be found in forbidden religions as well. One form of embrace that is worryingly common within the Thin-blooded in V5 is how agents are embraced as part of a covert mission from the SI to infiltrate the kindred lives, so you may be connected to the likes of the Society of Leopold and could employ that lore sheet from Chicago by Night, the First Inquisition from the core book as well, Anarch Revolt from Anarch or Black Site 24 or First Light, both of which are coming from Chicago by Night as well. If this is the sort of Thinblood you wish to create, think how they came about the embrace. Did they sign up for some weird experiment, offered a way out, or a means to be spared when the hunters come? There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers, and mechanics that work with and against them. These are just my takes and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan list? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make the concept just a little bit spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Seduce, lure, obsess, perform, charm. These 5 words of power are used to describe the clan of the Rose, Clan Toreador, or do they actually? I'm your lore and saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. The Toreadors are descendants of Arakel, the Toreador antediluvian, debatably the oldest Cainite 3 times removed from the biblical Cain, whose outburst of passionate anger and hatred resulted in the vampiric curse that would plague and dominate the world of darkness. Legend has it that Arakel, the founder of the clan, was once a mortal painter and sculptress who lived in the illustrious First City. Renowned far and wide for her stunning artwork, she was embraced into the world of the Cainites, Rites and soon-to-be kindred, and soon after, she painted a mural that depicted the past, present, and future of the vampiric society. As Cain's blossom, Arakel crafted intricate statues for the first city, impressing all who saw her work. However, when Cain foresaw a grim future for his kind, he cursed Arakel with an affliction that still plagues the Toreador today. Her love for art became an all-consuming obsession, distracting her from all else and driving her into a perpetual state of artistic frenzy. But the Toreador that would spawn from her would not be so animalistic, learning to refine and control their pursuits, but also becoming the remnant of the beating heart of the humanity that all the kindred of the Anarchs and Camarilla would soon emulate. It was a Toreador who named the Camarilla, conceptualized the Masquerade, and ranked the importance of each clan within the sect, defining how each modern kindred should behave, reshaping the political landscape in their image. If the Ventrue are the face of the Camarilla's political power, the Toreador are the embodiment of the sect's artistic and cultural influence. They are a clan of vampires who revel in the pleasures of the flesh and the aesthetic beauty of the world around them. Seducers and seduced in equal measure, the Toreador use their charms and lure to manipulate the mortal world and lure in their prey. But they are not just manipulators, they are also passionate devotees of the arts, from the grandest works of sculpture and painting to the subtlest nuances of music and dance. Their penchant for beauty and creativity has made them famous and infamous in equal measure. They are the entertainers, the innovators, and the trendsetters of the kindred world. But their reliance on their aesthetic veneer also makes them vulnerable to the harsh realities of the Camarilla's cult politics. For the Toreador, survival is not just a matter of physical strength or cunning, but also of maintaining the facade of civility and grace that the Camarilla prides itself on. They are one of the bastions of the sect, but also one of its most delicate and fragile components, for in a world of darkness, beauty is both a blessing and a curse. Regardless of their age, kindred emulate their humanity. This is fact and not up for dispute, as there are many instances across many books across various editions stating this. By some accounts, this makes any supernatural creature in the world of darkness an alien, not an out-of-space little green man sort of galactic tourist or invader, but more an emotional response. Every vampire that chooses to adhere to the path of humanity to some degree operates on the jaded and slowly disintegrating memory of their human experiences and the emotional responses to them as they survive night after night, dealing with mortals they have moved with the times and kindred that refuse to adapt. In other words, they work out to try to remember how one should behave and feel in mortal circles. It no longer is natural for them. Such vampires are almost locked in a prison, stuck in their old ways, whilst slowly realizing that the mortal social norms do not apply to them as they once did. Things like gender, sexuality, and law and order are mortal constructs to bind the lessers into place. Why should a vampire have to adhere to these limiting philosophies? The breadth of emotional and sensual possibility to explore what it means to truly feel is endless, and the Toreador, to one degree or another, try to redefine what it means to feel and experience emotion, and one of the freest ways we can begin to rethink our way is to behave as a Toreador might is through interpretation. Their hyper-focus of an artistic art form is an easy thing for the mortal to understand because of the old saying, beauty is the eye of the beholder. What is one other person's trash is another person's treasure, which is another simple, that looks nice, be it Japanese paintings in the 1800s, 21st century vaporwave music, nostalgic memories of Marvo crocheting in the 1990s, the bloody expression of a recent mass murder, or the twists and turns of a contemporary boxing, football, or cheese rolling match, which will cause some form of emotional response, and it is not always clear what the intention of it is. Art is not limited to what you only see, but what you feel and think. There is the texture, the way the image was projected, what it says about the artist, their resources, the creator's education or lack of thereof. They're just some of the things to ponder over, helping you better understand and appreciate the world around you, and the world that you're going to invest the next week, month, or even years over. There's also the fact of when they did it, what was going on in their life, their political leaning, and so forth. Nothing is created and expressed in a void. There is a reason for everything, and when it comes to expression, interpretation is just as important, as is the reason as to why you feel about it, or in the case of the Toreador, obsess over it, losing yourself in the beauty of creation or destruction. And it doesn't matter how much you feel or live this piece of art, no one will ever understand it because they are not you, and therefore will never appreciate things as you do. Think for a moment the loneliness that this creates, and how it could create an unhealthy sense of longing and a desire to feel as they once did, to be loved and lusted over. Kindred are creatures of extreme, so they give out too much, but they also demand unhealthy amounts of attention in return, which they can amplify with their blood with presence, which is very much their discipline. Every Toreador knows this, and they revel in it. They would never admit, because why would anyone reveal such a flaw to the world? For one thing, the Toreadors are not flawed, they are perfect. It is the world around them that is riddled with imperfections, silly. The Toreadors do not strive for control like a Ventrue or Tremere might. Their goals are much simpler and personal. They wish to enjoy the mortal world and play with it. Everything worth the time is now their plaything. Experiencing any emotion to the extreme is unhealthy, yes, but the Toreadors are not mentally sound. They are obsessive and easily bored. They expand their energy and excitement in huge bursts, focusing on a movement, subculture, but usually a person gaslighting them into believing they are the diamond in the rough before discarding them like a condom packet on the side of a street. You were yesterday's news, darling. The diva has got their fix and needs something new, fresh, and much stronger to stimulate their urges. They are supernatural junkies. Decide during character creation what your Toreador needs to survive. If you are struggling to decide, for the possibilities are seemingly endless, I recommend using my homebrew, the Autarchus Storyteller. Whilst it is meant as a solo play tool, there is a section in the character creation chapter that is dedicated to Toreador obsessions, in which you can roll some dice to narrow down your Toreador's obsessive hobby. As deep as I make the Toreador appear to be, they are outwardly shallow creatures. They pursue style over substance. As the Toreador, you aim to please the people of today rather than inspire those of tomorrow. You don't need to truly feel the social norms to operate it, you just need to understand how they work on a basic social level. If this sounds contradictory, this is a very basic understanding of a sociopath. This mentality gives the Toreador a vital role in the Camarilla they so named. Elysiums are up to date because they are the pulse that keeps the old blood circulating. They don't care for the emotions behind it, they just want to blend in, and the Toreador provide the gossip, bringing in someone down a peg or several in turn. This is all assuming they are the default Camarilla aligned Toreador, but those who defect to the Anarchs, the so-called abstract Toreador, are not so different yet very different at the same time. The Toreador's clan contribution to the Anarch movement is often overlooked due to their association with high society and appreciation for beauty. However, when Toreadors join the ranks of the Anarchists, it's a significant step for them as they cut themselves off from the traditional comforts and restrictions of their clan and sect. As part of the Anarchs, Toreadors often act as diplomats and liaisons, using their abilities to plead the Anarch's case in places where most Anarchs would have difficulty being invited. They can rally support from liberal societies, both kindred and kine, and convey the Anarch's platform with a grace that the less mannered supporters of the cause cannot imagine. Toreadors understand that change must occur at all levels of society, so whilst it's important to rally the disenfranchised kindred in the streets, it's equally vital to have representation in the halls of power. They take on this role and ensure that the Anarchs can make concessions without threatening the Masquerade, and that the Anarch cause can progress in steps rather than massive, sweeping, unmanageable coups. Although some Anarchs may make fun of the Toreador members, they are aware of their significant contribution to the cause. Toreadors take pleasure in this knowledge and sometimes have an air of hauteur about them. However, if the Anarchs ever become so angry that open revolt is the only option, no amount of smooth talking will be enough to prevent action. Within the Anarchs, the Toreador hierarchy remains intact, even though those who belong to the Camarilla still carry significant influence. For Toreadors, subsect needs and clan membership are closely intertwined. Despite being part of the Anarch movement, Toreadors still receive invitations to attend parties and other social gatherings, but often they're viewed as curious outsiders, much like a foreigner at a formal dinner. Instead of isolating themselves from kindred society, Toreadors aim to change the Camarilla from within, which would be impossible if they were to remove themselves from society altogether. While some non-Anarch Toreadors snub those who openly declare their Anarch loyalties, others secretly admire them for their bold and controversial expression of their beliefs. The expression or convincing of any opinion or belief is aided supernaturally with presence. To scare, inspire, allure, or arouse is easy to achieve for any Toreador who invests in presence. Note the importance of presence in relationship to the Toreador. This is not dominate. Breaking the mind and forcing someone's hand does not grant the mind the ability to think for itself. Presence helps with this, to heighten emotions and feel new themes. That it makes the targets of this more often than not willing, albeit one that is supernaturally coerced. Celerity may seem as an odd choice for the Toreador to possess, and is often associated with the more combat-heavy clans, and if your Toreador is, say, a fencer, boxer, or sniper, you're going to need to be quick. It's also perfect for the quickest of backhands at escaping when things get too much. You should also consider the speed in which you can move, how it can help you express paintings, sculptures, and the likes in ways no mortal could. Similarly, with Auspex, unlocking parts of your sixth senses that is impossible for most denizens within the world of darkness. The sixth sense here is the mind itself. With telepathy, true premonitions, and possession, I needn't say more of what these sensations could do for a Toreador other than make a mess on the floor. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways one can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. The most obvious three are Scene Queen, Osiris, and Siren, with each one tapping into more mortally social taboo feelings and expressions, though most of the predator types can be twisted into such a fashion. Grim Reaper from the Player's Guide focuses on the near release of death, whilst Pursuer and Alleycat on the core book and Player's Guide respectively focus on more intense emotions like fear and anger. The strong focus on emotions and expressions would be a good time to mention that this would be one of the few occasions I would recommend exploring blood resonances. Perhaps not mechanically, but exploring the different emotional states of the vessel/victim, how it affects the kindred in question, as well as the aftermath from the mortal's perspective. Consensualist is also recommended to the Toreador who likes upholding the facade that mortals who interact with you have free will. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here's some of the ones I fit well with tonight's clan. With the exception of unusual emotions or expressions and experiences that only a kindred could possibly feel, any of the cults in V5 would make for an interesting fit, particularly the Bahari in the core book and the Cultivators from Chicago by Night. The Toreadors have always been a high clan, which may be something you may wish to explore in your games, particularly in a Camarilla setting. Also from the core book is the only Toreador-only lore sheet as of the writing and recording of this script, which is the Descendant of Helena lore sheet, though technically speaking, so is Child of the Angel Michael from Cult of the Blood Gods, but that doesn't give you a pop-up club to play with. If an incarnation of the Succubus Club isn't your cup of joe, perhaps the Asylum with the Jeanette Therese Vorman lore sheet, also from the core book, the Blue Velvet, or the Painted Lady lore sheets from Chicago by Night. Abstract Toreadors may wish to employ the Anarch Revolt lore sheet from Anarch to inspire their fellow Anarchs into battle. If you are the only person who likes the Boston by Night sourcebook and running your VTM games in Boston, the Boston Camarilla lore sheet may offer you some entertainment. More flippant Toreadors embraced within the last 10 years or so may benefit from the Kindred social media influencer making all the hashtag totes poggers content for their fans. Finally, and certainly least, if you wish to become a Daughter of Cacophony, you can bend the stories of the Daughter's lore sheet from the World of Darkness side, but prepare to be greatly disappointed. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers, and mechanics that work with and against them. These are just my takes and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make that concept just a little bit spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Study, perfect, learn, scheme, perform rituals and sorceries. These 7.5 words of power are used to describe the Warlocks, Clan Tremere, or do they actually? I'm your Lord and Saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. Clan Tremere, or Tremere depending on who you ask, are the youngest of the vampiric clans in the World of Darkness, and debatably amongst the strongest. They are so named after the mage that founded them, Tremere, one of the founders of the Order of Hermes. Tremere sought two themes: power absolute and secrets to the eternal life. With his influence over the young populace of the Norman era, his power too dwindled, meaning his attempts to get what he wanted were remarkably flawed. Not wanting to accept that he was indeed mortal, he set about having his disciples find a solution. This led to a mage by the name of Goratrix attempting an elixir from the vitae of the likes of the Gangrel, Nosferatu, and Tzimisce blood, and a bloody ritual. This would grant the founding seven their immortality, yes, but it would strip them of their magic they would have mastered and turn them into vampires. They would overcome this minor setback, conjuring their own form of blood sorcery, thaumaturgy, and horrid rituals, creating many a horrid creature such as the gargoyle bloodline, and do war with the Tzimisce they tortured and made their mark in Cainite society. Hungry for more power, Tremere, through a Setite associate supposedly by accident, would discover the sleeping Saulot and diabolize him, assuming the mantle of the Tremere antediluvian and becoming eventually a multiple-eyed white worm whose presence is unknown to the world since the destruction of the Vienna Chantry in 2008. In between all this, the Tremere would become one of the founding clans of the Camarilla, providing the pillars and throne for which the Ventrue would sit. Goratrix, one of the most influential members of the Tremere, would also aid in the creation of the Sabbat. As is the case of most of the clans presented in this guide, the origins of this clan can tell you all that you need to know to step into the role of the Tremere. They are obsessive and they are perfectionists, most of who are embraced into the clan and unaware of the occult, at least to the extent of the usurpers. Some may dabble here and there with tarot, philosophy, occultism, witchcraft, and other possible secret societies that most would describe as highly specialized or niche, but they pale in comparison to the knowledge and power that House Tremere can bring to the table. You are a part of these groups because you are, to put it plainly, curious. You're already partway there, so why stop now? Why not push yourself to be better than the mage you were last night or an hour ago? But it's not some vampiric wizarding school. Very rarely is it about you, as unlife in the Chantry is a competition and everyone is out for themselves and will do what they can to put you beneath their boot. You serve the Tremere before you serve your sect. More often than not, it will be the Camarilla, and they will choke all aspects of true freedom from you. Your place, your duty is with your clan. Positions of power such as Prince or Sheriff are only of interest to the Tremere if it is helpful for them to expand their knowledge and personal power, not the Camarilla. Power is through the access of blood, hunting and interpreting the deep lore and possessing the rarest of ancient artifacts, all the while guarding and showing off their secrets to prove their worth. It's a spiraling contradiction of backstabbing, secrecy and personal discovery trapped under an oppressive boot. But their clan is often one that fears change and sharing. What good is knowledge if it is not shared? They made no secret about the Vienna Chantry being what it is, which is now how it was destroyed by the SI. they retreat to the shadows with their Camarilla, presenting an opportunity for the Assamites, the Banu Haqim, to replace them as the go-to sorcerers in Vampire the Masquerade. House Tremere of the Camarilla hold closely its dated traditions and overly cautious feeding practices, as mentioned in page 143 of the Camarilla sourcebook for V5, which is a testament to their strength that, despite this, they remain mostly unfettered. The Tremere clan is known for its highly structured organization. Their hierarchical system resembles a pyramid, with the Tremere at the very top, Tremere himself, and the Council of Seven just below him, each overseeing a specific geographical area, and so on and so forth. This well-defined hierarchy ensures that each Tremere knows their exact position within the clan and can trace the path of power from the current standing to Tremere himself. It provides a sense of comfort and security, knowing that they have a well-established place within the order of things. Of course, as times change rapidly, forcing the kindred to adapt, they do not allow the young to pave the way forward to the clan, still persistent of holding them with a very tight leash, which has never really loosened. Yes, the infamous blood bonding culture, for lack of a better phrase, dissolved with the destruction of the Vienna Chantry, implying the death of Tremere and or the Council of Seven, but blood bonding your chowder is probably the easiest way to control someone. Dominate still exists, as does presence. Auspex penetrates secrets buried deep within the brain too, and their blood sorcery can also be used for excruciating torture as well. It will not take them any time at all to find the locations of your loved ones and friends and the things one can do, and even with a spoken threat, can wrap your prey around your finger because no one would want to even test the challenge. The breaking of these millennia-old bonds have forced the clan to become more creative and almost expressive with their tyranny over their own clan. This is the main thing that has changed within House Tremere after the destruction of the Vienna Chantry, that is. The force they wield reeks of callous desperation. In turn, you two have to be as well. Do you cave in and become the monster your superiors and your elders expect you to be, or are you afraid or unsure of your blood sorcery? And don't think that it is not a viable option to play a Camarilla Tremere, or any Tremere really, that doesn't have blood sorcery. There are few characters with notably no understanding of thaumaturgy. The Tremere Esosara from House of Tremere actually has no points in the discipline, serving the house as a warrior. It would put a cap on his ranks and status, yes, but that is always an option for players who want to explore this sort of tale in their chronicles. But following Carl Schrecht and House Tremere wanting things to return to the glory days of the clan is not all that available in the 5th edition setting. House Kana, the so-called Blood Witches, are a feminist fringe faction group that are far less formal than the Pyramid of old, and more fierce and determined, more successful in their creativity. They are ripe with vengeful fantasies and sanguine cravings, to quote the Camarilla book once more. It should be noted that House Kana are not aligned with the Anarchs, but Anarch sympathizers. This is a misconception common with V5 discussion. Whilst Kana's breaking of her own blood bonds are inspiring for many a hopeful young Tremere, she is still with the Camarilla, as are her followers. They just have different means of practicing their magic through traditions one may associate with paganism and witchcraft in a stereotypical sense, that is, because World of Darkness. Anarch Tremere do exist, though it will probably come to no surprise to you that they are still insular in nature, which does naturally cause others to view them with suspicion and distrust, making it difficult for those within the clan who seek change. While other kindred are allowed to some room for rebellion, Tremere's hierarchical foundation resists any form of turbulence, making it challenging for radicals. Those Tremere who wish to leave the pyramid structure and join the Anarchs must face the resentment and attention of one of the most powerful clans, which often leads to the abandonment by both groups. However, those who do find a place among the Anarchs can offer unique assets, mainly with their blood magic, that can even the odds on the battlefield and provide new research tactics. They are often treated as tools rather than individuals, leading many Tremere Anarchs to feel disillusioned and eventually leave the movement, becoming autarkas or become targets of assassination attempts by paranoid elders of the clan. Finally, you have the Ipsissimus Tremere, however that word's pronounced, who practice bloodletting and sacrificial sacrificial rituals, somewhat more open with their murderous intent when compared to their Camarilla brethren. If it was not clear, they are not in favour of the Anarch movement, or even that for mortal sake, but even for their hatred for the Camarilla, they cannot seek their own magical pursuits. Ipsimus is a Latin phrase that roughly means his most selfness or self-est, which I personally translate as the most independent, self-thinking one can achieve. Perhaps not a truly correct understanding of the word, but it makes sense all the same. Now, I am aware that I have not included House Goratrix, the Tremere of the Sabbat, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the Sabbat are not a playable option in 5th edition, and it is not appropriate to discuss that here. Second, even if they were, the Sabbat are so wildly different from their rivals that a separate RP guide for the Sabbat would be needed to discuss the nuances found there. If that is something that would interest you, leave a comment below. Regardless of sex allegiance, it should be apparent by now that the real power of the Tremere have come from the unified front that they represent. Take on one Tremere and you take on them all, despite the backstabbing. Once an eternal threat manifests, all of the warlocks lockstep. Blood sorcery is perhaps the most important skill any Tremere should have, but remember, not being an expert from the get-go is totally okay. To start weak and develop over time is great character development, so is the inverse if you're willing to be creative. It is a pillar in the Ivory Tower, one that has a lot of mistrust causing plenty of damage to the mind and body, always very close to being a Masquerade bridge. With this thirst for knowledge and power, the Tremere willing to go to great lengths to acquire both, and when the blood sorcery dominate, which allows them to exert their will overs and bend them to their desires, is the next best thing. The secrets of the minds and the bodies of mortals allows them to act with impunity. In their pursuit of sustenance, a Tremere will not hesitate to use their powers to force a mortal to submit and offer up their blood. Finally, you have the spiritual Auspex. They can perceive the auras of others, allowing them to see beyond what the mortal eye can behold. They can search for evidence of magical essences and important objects left behind, and can use this power to communicate with each other across vast distances without fear of being overheard. But Auspex is not merely a tool for gathering information. When the Tremere need to feed, Auspex can be used to pileable vessels for the creative warlock, reading their emotions to determine what a mortal needs in order to be more malleable. They also use this discipline to see through even the most elaborate deceptions. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways you can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. Scene Queen will fit with most Tremere concepts, as they prioritise their feeding with their subcultures and specialist pursuits, though some may belong or lead a cult and may benefit from the Osiris predator type, both of which can be found in the core book. A more difficult twist on this is with the extortionist predator type, from Cult to the Blood Gods. Many use their blood sorcery as assassins, so one that puts the more social Tremere in the spotlight, so to speak. Those that wish to uphold the title of usurper may wish to follow the blood leech predator type, also from the core book. And whilst this is not a 5th edition book, I'm going to recommend any serious Tremere player to grab a copy of Rites of the Blood for V20, as that really dissects a lot of the different cultures of the thaumaturgy across the sects as well as the Tremere in general. You'll find a link to that book in the description below. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here's some of the ones I think fit well with tonight's clan. As the different houses have been a focus of this RP guide, given that they would direct much of the culture of the Tremere and your possible relationship with blood sorcery, I'm going to suggest Descendant of Karlshrecht and Low and High Clan from the core book, as V5 classes them both with these in the Modern Knights, the Pyramid from Camarilla, Lost Secrets of the Milwaukee Chantry from Let the Streets Run Red, the Hartford Chantry from the awfully disappointing Boston by Night sourcebook, Let, Kana from the core book, Praepositor from the Forbidden Religion sourcebook, and Vienna Zero from Blood Sigils. For more occult artifacts fun, try Occult Artifacts from Chicago Folios. With closer ties to Tremere and Saulot, you can check out the Machinations of Saulot from the Book of Nod Apocrypha, but if you only want the lore sheet, I will leave a link to that in the description below. For some spicy Sabbat connections, I recommend Revenant Family Ducheski from Chicago by Night. Most of the other cult lore sheets are viable too for more esoteric approaches to blood sorcery research, just not the Cult of Mithras. Not because for the lore sheet doesn't allow Tremere characters to join, it is just that Mithras infamously hates the Tremere, but if your ST is down with a Tremere Mithras cultist, go for it. Finally, I would suggest the Convention of Thorns, as many Tremere would know something that went down, in addition to the Anarch Revolt from the core book and Anarch respectively, as the Tremere were integral to both. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are right, but most of them are wrong. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers, and mechanics that work with and against them. These are just my takes, and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make the concept just a little bit spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Grasp, possess, transfigure, modify, control. These 5 words of power are used to describe the dragons, Clan Tzimisce, or do they actually? I'm your Lord and Saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. In contrast to last week's focus, the Tzimisce are said to be amongst the oldest of the clans embraced, at least according to the themes. Their antediluvian is an eldritch horror known simply as the Eldest. The legend of Irad tells the story of Irad, who tried to purge himself of an evil using his mastery of Protean. He spat out a mass of evil which was consumed by a mortal who appeared to be normal. Irad brought the mortal to his brother Enoch's attention, who embraced him out of curiosity. This resulted in the creation of the Tzimisce antediluvian. Scholars have different theories about why Enoch chose to embrace Tzimisce, but some believe he did so because he believed Tzimisce could master the cruel parts of vampirism. Seeing no potential growth in its vampiric cousins, the eldest left the first city, travelling to what would be known as Transylvania, and freed a slumbering entity called Kapala, but could not sever the ties between it and the Carpathian land. Tzimisce lived in its new domain during the deluge, offering shelter to escaping mortals in exchange for blood. When cursed by Cain, the eldest suffered as it's disconnected from the ancient land claimed by Kapala, though some would claim that this demonic entity was the one that bore the curse to the eldest. After doing battle with Samael, the child of Saulot, the Tzimisce would rebirth itself in the bowels of one of its chowder, and nurtured in the infamous Cathedral of Flesh by leaders of the clan. Fast forward a few hundred years, and the Tzimisce, tired of the tyrannical rule and severed as the heart as the Anarch Revolt, diablerizing their antediluvian, though some say it resides in the depths of New York. The Tzimisce would serve as one of the linchpins of the Sabbat, before Metaplot shenanigans, vaguely explained, forced the younger ones to join the Anarch movement for reasons. The departure of the Tzimisce from the Sabbat should speak volumes to anyone who has played Vampire the Masquerade in any shape or form prior to the release of 5th edition. As touched upon moments ago, the Tzimisce are traditionally the soul of the Sabbat, whilst their partners in vampiric crime, the Lasombra, are its sword, or rather, the Lasombra use the Sword of Cain as a tool and means of dominance over what they consider to be the lesser species of Cainite and the mortal cattle they feed upon. The essence of the Sabbat, the heart and soul of its rites, vinculum, monomancy, etc., comes from the Tzimisce's own noble cultures twisted into horribly sacred forms. The blood of Cain metamorphosizes any and all it touches, and the Tzimisce challenge this philosophy, what it means to be a child of Cain, and what is indeed the final form of vampirism. Gender and sex are insignificant, being true to oneself is. It is no surprise that the Tzimisce have been adopted by trans VTM players, to which I say, all the power to you. But from these fiends, we begin to establish our themes of dominion. There is control upon oneself, both in physical image but also reshaping the soul, a personal path of metamorphosis to achieve some semblance of enlightenment. This is a risky thing to manage from many aspects. Your peers and the unknown mortals would very likely stare and judge at your 10 new eyes and curvy, thick frame as you enter the rave or Elysium, and most storytellers worth their salt would remind said players to exercise vicissitude, lest to feel the painful consequences that Masquerade breaches can bring. But I think many people can sympathise and empathise with teenagers who are murdered for wanting to exist as their true selves, gone or going through the processes of transitioning from one gender to another, or not wanting to identify as any gender, more than one, or adopt neo-pronouns. Countries and many US states are enforcing tighter and crueler rules on transgender people, with some members of the public taking matters into their own hands, performing disgusting witch hunts and murdering innocent people. When bringing in real ongoing events in the world in 2023, it does not provide that much escapism in that sense. Only the Tzimisce vampire have the means to strike back, to embed fear into their hearts via the reshaping of their ribcage so it punches said heart, if that is what the Tzimisce wants. There will be many individuals in the Fiend's Unlife who will tell them, no, you can't walk around looking like that, and any good Tzimisce should adopt the sense of rebellion to go, fuck you, this is me. Perhaps to no elder's face, but all the strength to you if that is your method of approach. Your existence and persistence to live in defiance of the jaded elders running and hiding in the shadows is more than enough. I'm aware as I exercise this point and draw similarities to ongoing events and people that I will garner two sorts of responses. There is the first group, trans and non-binary folk who feel immediately called out and seen, perhaps for the first time, possibly realising parts about themselves they hadn't realised before, and if that's the case, you are safe here and your life matters. Then there's the second group of people who don't like what I have just said and have made the Tzimisce woke. Well, sorry to burst your snot-filled bubble, the Tzimisce always have been, and with a game where the main focus of setting is the old versus the new establishment, if it was very appropriate to make these modern connections, go touch some fucking grass. But I digress. The undying need to control extends beyond one's personal frame in 5th edition. In older materials, the Tzimisce were cursed to the land of some significance, be it where they were born, died, popped their cherry, so on and so forth. This is not the case for the Tzimisce of 5th edition, as their supernatural possessiveness extends to other defined and limited themes, each depending on the Canaanite in question. 5th edition does indeed acknowledge what they call a historical bane, but it encourages other avenues should the player want it. On the one hand, this makes sense when you consider the inspiration of the Tzimisce lies with the original tales of Count Dracula and other stereotypical portrayals of the romantic gothic vampire from Transylvania. They are regal, noble creatures with sophistication coursing their veins. They hail from impressive castles and know how the land and its residents with the back of their hands. They are the land they govern, bound to it and all of its charges. Why wouldn't the Tzimisce, the most powerful in that domain, honour that? But of course, such aesthetics are somewhat dated in the 21st century, and any creature that wishes to survive the changing times has to adapt and evolve with its people, so instead of peasant farmers, Tzimisce may be forced to rule over migrant workers. Like a raven, you may have an affinity to silver, or were a werewolf hunter or worked with silver, so now it is something you associate yourself with a lot. It is also a status symbol and could be a reflection of your wealth, or a nasty means of a death wish paired with the right flaws could produce some particularly interesting results. There is no denying that this new bane makes them very close to the Ventrue, and given the esoteric nature of it all, including my examples, does make the Tzimisce look like budget Dracula, or as I've often put it, fleshy draconic landlords with hoarding problems, so I don't think anyone would be annoyed if you chose the default tides to the soil bane of old. However, do try and explore this possessiveness at least once before dismissing it entirely. The Tzimisce may be called dragons, but they do not hoard things for the sake of hoarding, as I feel the companion and player's guide implies. Whatever it is you should should govern and oversee. Two deliberate word choices, I must add. They should be personal to your character's backstory. Think about all that has been discussed so far, about the sort of things that connect these concepts together. The Tzimisce are strong of spirit, often with a true sense of self. To rule, one must have some sort of intelligence, or at least the wits and leadership to do what one wants. Of course, there are many ways one can rule. You could inspire others into greatness, making your allies feel they are equal among you, or you can intimidate them into submission, reminding that there are worse things in life than death from a foe. The Tzimisce may describe themselves as noble, but that does not equal a positive, favourable moral alignment. Many Tzimisce are depraved beings that revel in torture, turning that spiritual enlightenment I spoke of earlier and expanding their research outwards, or just may enjoy being assholes. Though any vampire without purpose and motivation do not intend to survive very long in the world of darkness. They are the first vampires to create revenants, a special type of ghoul bred for a specific purpose, the families of which are the results of hundreds of years of inbreeding and incest. They create the likes of Schlachter and Vojd, nightmare ghouls created from dozens of bodies, usually dead. The masters of flesh and body sculpting are very expressive with all this, and any practice of this does not do humanity much favours. Annoyingly, neither companion or player's guide, where the material is shamelessly copied and pasted, offer any advice on how to address this matter. If you want my opinion, which I'm sure you do, I mean, why else would you be here, I would, at a minimum, place a stain on the offending vampire. More barbaric uses may result in immediate humanity reduction, but exercise with caution and remember that the lower the humanity goes, the less the vampire gives a fuck, and the more boundaries they would have to cross to get that even lower. But what of politics? Remember that the Tzimisce, by and large, if we take the companion books' suggestions, are prominently anarch, not as common as other clans, say as the Brujah or Gangrel. The existence of Tzimisce in this sect would still be an oddity, especially with all the history behind them, mainly with the Sabbat. Do remember, and be sure to remind anyone who argues with you, that the Tzimisce were the first anarch vampires. How frequently you wish to exercise this opinion is down to the character concept and how much they would have been taught of the clan history, but everything we've discussed so far makes them a true modern anarchist, and depending on the concept, perhaps one of the more humane ones too, or at least one that empathizes with a large minority group. Others may assume a much needed leadership role, one with a bit more grace than a Brujah and one that has action in their blood, unlike the Ventrue that adorn the anarch cape. Some do exist in the Camarilla, which may surprise you. It is widely known among the kindred that the Tzimisce and Ivory Tower do not mix. The presence of their Tremere rivals within the Camarilla further solidifies the Tzimisce's aversion to joining the sect en masse. However, there have been rare instances of individual Tzimisce choosing to work with the Camarilla, driven by personal motives such as seeking revenge or eliminating a rival within the Sabbat. With this in mind, most Tzimisce that choose to ally themselves with the Camarilla do not make their presence known. They do not seek leadership roles within the sect, nor do they tend to stick around once their objectives have been achieved. Their loyalty to their own clan far outweighs any temporary alliances they may gain from the Camarilla. In short, their presence is brief and use the tower for their own gains. Consider also if your Tzimisce is one of the ones who left the Sabbat. You are not going to be as humane as your associates. Think carefully how you adjust to this new world and why you fled the Sabbat, or were you exiled or sent to whichever sect you game has you as a spy. In the world of darkness, the Tzimisce vampires have a deep connection with the animal kingdom. For some, animalism is a way to extend their influence over their domains, while for others it is a tool to control the lesser beasts and claim their territories. Regardless of the approach, Tzimisce have always had a strong bond with the wild creatures of their ancestral lands. The discipline of Dominate is a powerful tool for Tzimisce vampires use to enforce their will and control the minds of others. With its help, they can easily dominate their subjects and shape them into loyal servants who will follow their every command. This discipline is also essential for the use of vicissitude, which is a very unique blend of protein that allows the Tzimisce to shape their bodies into various forms, such as bats or wolves, that are associated with their clan's ancestral lands. However, many Tzimisce make their mastery of their body to another level with vicissitude. With this discipline, they could transform their own bodies and use those of their subjects into primal clay, creating grotesque and terrifying creatures that are uniquely suited to their needs. For the Tzimisce, this is the ultimate expression of their power and control over the physical world. Whilst not of their 5th edition makeup, I will also include Auspex, which took the place of dominating every edition of Tzimisce have made an appearance in. Auspex allows the Tzimisce to discover the victim's phobias and dirty little secrets, and to discern which areas of their victims' bodies are particularly sensitive when applying torture. I'm also going to touch upon blood sorcery, as the Blood Sigils book introduced some incarnations of cultonic sorcery, pun intended. Having a blood sorcerer Tzimisce provides unique roleplay opportunities, as well as a relationship with blood sorcery available only to this clan. These Tzimisce here believe they are the first and of course the most skilled blood sorcerers to ever exist. Legends say that they once ruled over the earth with such mastery that even the elements themselves obeyed their every command. Their magic was so potent that it even inspired the Black Hand to adopt the rituals that hold the ravenous beasts at bay. Whenever weakened will workers sought to supplement their fading sorcery, they turned to the old clan's vitae to steal their power. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways one can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here's what I would suggest. For most, Alley Cat will suit most Tzimisce, though those who wish to play into their bane should consider Osiris, Sin Queen, or even the likes of Roadside Killer and Grim Reaper from the core book, Cult of the Blood God, Let the Streets Run Red, and the Player's Guide respectively. Osiris also allows that dotted blood sorcery, if your ST is okay with this, as the Tzimisce, worried about killing their living works of art, could consider using Farmer or Bloodleech, as the Tzimisce that wishes to let their prey come to them, like some modern-day Dracula, may wish to use Trapdoor from the Player's Guide. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here's some of the ones I think fit well with tonight's clan. Any NPC-focused lore sheet would cause an interesting stir, associating themselves with a Tzimisce, as it would always be a scandalous affair. Whether you're trying to get into a sex properly or out of a horrible situation, it's going to be a spicy relationship all the way. The Tzimisce have always been a high clan, so keep that core book lore sheet in mind. Any of the cult-related lore sheets could bring some much-needed spiritualism and perhaps a taste of Sabbat into your chronicle. That said, Kindred Dueling from Chicago Folios is essentially monomancy, and it wouldn't hurt the Tzimisce perhaps taking the Book of Nod or Anarch Revolt from Chicago by Night and Anarch respectively. Tzimisce that wish to go toe-to-toe with the Shadow Lords and other guru could consider Lupine Expert from Chicago by Night and the Omnubi from Let the Streets Run Red. Vienno Zero allows the Tzimisce Coldon to focus a bit more on their craft, which, like Coldonic sorcery, can be found in blood sigils. Despite being labelled occult artifacts, a lenient ST may allow a player to pick up occult artifacts, which comes from Chicago Folios. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers, and mechanics that works with and against them. These are just my takes, and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make that concept just a little bit spicy? Let me know in the comments below. Rule, lead, influence, endure, govern. These 5 words of power are used to describe the aristocrats, Clan Ventrue, or do they actually? I'm your Lore and Saviour, and this is the Bloody Guide to Vampire Roleplay. The Ventrue are a notable lineage of vampires who take great pride in maintaining a reputation for property, leadership, and honourable conduct, though the Blue Bloods themselves would say they are the proudest. They believe it is their duty to guide and lead others, and a sense of responsibility has always been a part of their ethos. They consider themselves the oldest clan, and as such, they see it as their responsibility to uphold tradition and serve as enforcers of law and order in canine society. Legend has it that Ventrue, without an E on the end, is the antediluvian of the Ventrue clan. Shocker, I know. The true origins of this mythical figure remain shrouded in mystery, with conflicting accounts and rumours abounding. According to the Ventrue, he was the progeny of Enoch, and the first of the third generation of vampires, as well as the trusted advisor of Cain himself. Some tales even have it that Cain himself saw something special in the young Ventrue and took him under his wing, eventually gifting him to Enoch for the embrace. Regardless of the embrace, Ventrue was supposedly the builder and ruler of the fabled Second City. The Ventrue antediluvian would become Cain's right-hand man and enforcer, serving as Enoch's proxy among the populace of the First City. In fact, on the very night before the deluge destroyed the First City, Cain himself visited the Ventrue antediluvian and entrusted him with the weighty responsibility of safeguarding all of his descendants, including Enoch himself. It is said that the Ventrue antediluvian was the last of Cain's children to lay eyes on the Dark Father before the Great Flood, and that he alone was tasked with carrying on Cain's legacy. To this day, the Ventrue clan cherishes their history above all else, viewing it as a sacred guide to live by and a means of justifying their positions of authority. Though they may not always be concerned with the truth, they understand the power of a good myth, and their own tale of grand achievements and conquests is one that few other clans can match. They can see themselves as the rightful heirs to their legacy of their founder, who they believe led the antediluvians for a time, and they will stop at nothing to maintain their position of superiority and leadership over the other clans. To that end, it probably would not surprise you that the Ventrue have firmly sunk its fans within mortal society, embedding it with their own. Throughout history, the Ventrue have been embraced from the ranks of nobility and privilege, including kings, merchant princes, knights, and warlords. There is a reason they are dubbed the Clan of Kings, and it was never a subtle one. As time has passed, they have adapted to the changing times, and in the modern era, they are more like politicians and CEOs than noble warriors or barren lords. They strongly support the Camarilla and the Masquerade, their prized jewels, as they believe these institutions are essential for protecting vampires from the ever-growing mortal population and maintaining their power and influence. You, dear Ventrue player-to-be, are among them, the most recent in line for the throne of the Clan of Kings, and a lot of is expected of you, but that should be something that your character should be used to, or even get a little buzz out of it. If you cannot deal with the heat to problem solve and turn those issues into profitable solutions, you're not worthy of the blood. It is often the case that players adorn the mantle of blue blood for wealth and power, already at the top of their game, but if you've maxed all that out in the blooding stages of character creation, you've already hit the ceiling and cannot fly any higher. Perhaps your character is a secretary who wishes to call the shots themselves. Perhaps you are a middle class rather than upper class. You are a politician that demands change rather than making change. And who is to say that your character mingles the upper echelons of society? Perhaps you are part of a secret society or run a club or music label. My very first vampire character was a Ventrue crime boss that sold drugs and hookers in equal measures. They ruled the streets and the bedroom, but not boardrooms. I did, however, design them in a way that there was room for improvement, as I had a part of their backstory that he showed potential, that he was something in an experiment. As with any business deal, risk-taking is minimal, unless it is so wild that one could consider a gamble which would excite all those involved, merely because the chance of success is low but the payoff would be huge. Whilst it is hard to think of elder Ventrues in stuffy offices getting excited over anything, something about you has to garner, at the very least, their curiosity to consider you for the embrace. What riches do you bring to your sire, clan, and Camarilla? What could make things very exciting is your character being one of the sort of individuals whose embrace wasn't planned, a feeding gone wrong, or you were thralled as a ghoul and made to protect and serve your dominator for years before receiving your promotion. The class divide in this instance is greater and more noticeable here, and it should be something for you to consider as well. To think further outside the box, a Ventrue will embrace someone whose skill set is lacking in the clan, such as the gangster example I gave earlier, or a bodyguard who would naturally be some more forward in combat department areas. Bobby Weatherbottom is a hacker, the first non-Nosferatu to access ShrekNet. In the digital age, where companies and people are ruined in a single tweet, it would make sense for any Ventrue to be on the top of social media. Even with these examples, the opportunity for the Ventrue to rule over is still pretty present here, and that is the important thing with any Ventrue. It is their birthright to rule, even if you have to wait for your superior to kick the bucket before you can take their place. The same, however, cannot be said of the Anarch Ventrues, the adorably named Free Ventrue. They are not free in the sense, like all vampires, are trapped in the eternal struggle and the jihad, but are in many ways worse off. Existing in the movement is like an exiled king with his tail between his legs. Little is done to earn the respect of your peers, but because of your lineage, it is demanded all the same. You, arch enemies of the Anarchs, are not trusted, and your status of high clan will mean very little here, but the skill sets of dominance and memory erasure and planting are. They, much like their Camarilla ilk, fiercely guard their hold on wealth and power and bristle at the mere suggestion that their chowder might challenge their traditional monopoly. Of course, this rigid grip on authority drives some Ventrue to rebel and join the Anarch movement. Overbearing sires can provide stifling, leaving their chowder feeling trapped and resentful. Without the chance to establish their own spheres of influence, a Ventrue child's existence becomes a mere trophy for their sire and a prison for themselves. They are driven by a desire to redistribute power more equably among the kindred, giving them a chance to finally grasp the wealth and influence that their sires hold just out of reach. The Ventrue Anarch's ambition is a driving force, and they are unashamed to admit it. They want what others have, and they will do what it takes to attain it. Ventrue Anarchs often have access to high society, making them valuable assets to the movement, which means they often, but not always, act as diplomats, tacticians, statesmen, and organizers, stepping forward to lead the ranks of the Anarchs in times of open conflict. They are skilled negotiators and strategists, always on the lookout for opportunities to turn their rivals' weaknesses to their own advantage. Some are bitter and cynical, but others channel their passion into brilliant tactics, striking deals and advancing the Anarch's cause. Despite waving a different flag, Free Ventrues are still the vampiric embodiment of establishment. Alternatively, you can join or start a cult. Religion and faith are much stronger in the Camarilla than it ever has been before, and the free Anarchs are open to a bit of experimentation, as well as emotional, mental, and spiritual expression. Two of these cults are Ventrue driven, and neither of its founders fit into the stereotypical Ventrue mold, at least not ones pertaining to the modern night setting, or indeed the ones belonging to the Camarilla and Anarch, which leaves only the Sabbat and Dark Ages, but both of those are conversations for different times. What I will conclude with before discussing more of the mechanical considerations will be a segue with the clan's unique bane, their feeding restriction, which can be as vague or as specific as you wish, but it is best to have it tied to your character's backstory and lifestyle in some sense. For example, if your Ventrue has a thing for smokers, is it because your character in life was a heavy smoker that could show David Barry a thing or two? Or is it because you have a strong, unresolved feelings to that heavy smoker lover or rival? If the character only drinks from blue-eyed, caffeinated women, is that a reflection of your embrace, caught off guard as you sipped that instant coffee that eventual night? Or is your character a dirty bastard who loves his women roasted? Maybe you can only feed on two very particular individuals because of your intense emotions to them, be good or bad. Make the feeding restriction make sense, unless you want to pursue the spicy option of letting the ST decide what it is and you, the hopeful fledgling that doesn't know their arse from their elbow, work it out for themselves. To that end, your choice of prey will dictate how you go to feed, but the easiest way is to establish a herd of sorts. But Timmy the Fresh Ventrue will have to work out how to do that, and so so do you with your new gifts. The Ventrue are the masters of the domain, their domain, and they use their disciplines with care and precision. They know how to manipulate their subjects and deal with threats that come their way. They are the rulers of the night, and their power and influence are felt throughout their cities. Dominate, in particular, is pretty much the signature discipline of the Ventrue. They will use it to exert their will over their subjects, bending them to their desires with a mere thought. With a single command, a Ventrue can order a mortal to bare their neck, allowing them to feed with ease. They can also erase all memory of feeding, ensuring that the Ventrue remains intact. Presence is a tool that the Ventrue use to build their influence over others. They seek to tame the vampiric court and build the love and devotion of others towards their rule. With presence, they can make themselves appear more attractive, charming, and irresistible to their subjects. They can also use presence to show off their power, making others see how easily they can acquire vessels. This is particularly useful for hungry blue-blooded kindred who value the conversation of time and resources. Finally, you have fortitude, which all Ventrue worth their salt should have. It allows them to withstand even the hardest of attacks, whether it be an army or a single assassin. What good is a king that cannot survive the mightiest of battles? A Ventrue with great understanding of fortitude can shrug off most of what is thrown at them with ease, whilst others, lesser kindred, falter under such hostile conditions. With this wide range of functions, there are many ways you can bend predator types to fit your kindred concepts, but here is what I would suggest. Most Ventrue would benefit from Osiris or Scene Queen, feeding from their followers and loyal subjects, doing as minimal work as possible. Trapdoor could fit into this as well, and depending on the permission of the ST, Montero and Extortionist would also be appropriate for crime-related Ventrue. A blue blood that is restricted to their family or a type or group of people may wish to consider Cleaver or Roadside Killer, the latter from Let the Streets Run Red. Remember that whatever you pick, it should complement the feeding restriction. There are many lore sheets you can assign to your character, but here are some of the ones I think fit well with tonight's clan. A Ventrue wanting to do as little as possible to get to their blood, or perhaps desperate to find exactly what it is they're looking for, may wish to consider taking one of the dots in the circulatory system. Most Ventrue characters will be aligned with the Camarilla, and there are plenty of lore sheets for that. They are excluding any NPCs the character may wish to buddy up with, Convention of Thorns, Sect War Veteran and High Clan from the Core Book, Anarch Revolt and Ruins of Carthage from Anarch, as the Ventrue were responsible for that falling. You also have Bad Art Industries from Chicago by Night, Archons and the Wolf Pack from Chicago Folios, The Promise of 1528 from Cult of the Blood Gods, the Boston Camarilla from Boston by Night, Agents of Justicar Parr from Fall of London, and St. Paul from issue 2 of the Winter's Teeth comic series. For the inverse, Anarch Ventrue would benefit from Anarch focus lore sheets, but to save myself from hashing out another long list, you can refer to the Bloody Guide to the Brujah. Finally, there are some Ventrue only lore sheets you may wish to consider, such as Descendant of Hardestat from the Core Book, Pure Ventrue Lineage from the Camarilla Sourcebook, Descendant of Lodin from Chicago by Night, and Spear of Orphea from Forbidden Religions. There are many ways one can build a character. Some of them are wrong, but most of them are right. Ultimately, it should be the narrative that drives the stats, powers, and mechanics that works with and against them. These are just my takes, and mine alone. How would you build a character belonging to this vampire clan? What wouldn't you do? What would you add to shake things up and make that concept just a little bit spicy? Let me know in the comments below. To be kept updated, follow the Lore by Night VTM Instagram and Blue Sky pages to find out when we upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, and you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.